All right, I'm going to call to order the SAU's Chair meeting. So, welcome everyone. We are with a good agenda tonight, and we will start with Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I just want to mention that this is a recorded meeting, and it's being live streamed on YouTube and then also Google Meet, I believe, so that people want to comment. But I'm going to pass it over to the team now to do the presentation.
Hello, my name is Dr. Cascadden, and you might have got a few parent squares from me over the last few days. But here I am live in person. Roy, how many people we have on the Google Meet? No, I mean on the YouTube stream?
47.
47 people, just so you know, who've done the YouTube stream. We don't have anyone on the Google Meet. We didn't try to manage to do that. We're going to keep that open in case some people want to comment on that. We have 8 board members present. We expect one more. We expect Bryce to be here. Jared Duncan will not join us. He's not joining remotely. So we do not have to institute procedures like we would in a remote meeting. We don't have to have roll call votes and so forth. At this point, why don't we go down the table and introduce the board members and which district you represent.
I'm Jenna Reardon. I represent both.
Jennifer Strongman, Bow.
Clark Hospital, oh.
Eric Schulman, Jeff Moody, Dunbarton. Jeff Trexler, Dunbarton. Clem Madden, Dunbarton.
All right, thank you. I want to thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you for all you listening online, and really thank you for the very thoughtful comments on back to school. Read every single one of them, learned some things, thought about some things deeply, and they were. It was really a good process for me and a lot of good stuff. I know Bryce is just coming in, Bryce Larrabee from both. He's going to be summarizing those later on, not reading them verbatim. A couple things I want to stress. This is an SAU board decision that they have to make. And so the SAU purpose time is to come, listen to their community, and then make a decision. When we showed you the agenda, it'll be kind of a modified Robert's Rules of Orders in the sense that after hearing me talk a little bit, all summarizing the public comment, anyone who wants to speak here definitely, and if we get anyone popping online to speak, the board will have a time to talk among themselves and talk about things that they want to do, elements that they want to emphasize in the plan. The plan that I put forth is not a complete plan. It has some decisions that need to be made within the plan. So prior to adoption, some decisions need to be made, and the board kind of needs to discuss those. They'll make a motion, we'll look at adopting the plan and go from there and move forward. And so what I feel my job was to develop a framework for the decisions to be made. I've been working on this for quite a few years. There are some things we had to look at as far as satisfying requirements for ESSER grants and also looking at where we were before. So I'm going to present the plan. I'm not going to do PowerPoint. Most of the people have read the plan and so forth. I'm going to just emphasize some things that have really come to my mind in the last few days as we've been looking for it. The first one is a goal and mission-driven plan. You need to have a goal. You need to know where you want to end up before you start writing a plan. And 2, it's got to be flexible. Well, one thing I've learned over the last couple of years of dealing with COVID is you can make all the plans you want. you might have to scrap them in 2 weeks if the environment changes. And there are two quotes on planning that I like. The first one is an old Hebrew saying that says, "Man plans and God laughs." And I think when you look at it, it's like, yeah, we can make all the plans we want, but circumstances change and we have to change those and so forth. And the other one's from Dwight Eisenhower, who said, "Plans are nothing, planning is everything." Yeah, it's absolutely important to plan. It's absolutely important to talk through all the issues you need when you have to plan. But even though you write a plan and you think you have it perfect, you may chuck it out and you may make changes as you go along. So what is our goal this year? So when I comb through the ESSER guidance and I comb through everything that's going on, our goal this year is to open school in person with the least amount of restrictions possible while maintaining needed protocols to address levels of community and school transmission. So the first thing, our goal is to open school in person. We didn't lose as much time as other districts and other places did in the last few years as far as being remote. We did have some time where we went to half in and half out, but there are kids who haven't been in school for a long, long time. I mean, nationally, there are kids who haven't been in school for like over a year. And the feds, when they put out these plans and they started giving us guidance, get the kids back in school. That's where your best learning takes place. That's where your best socialization takes place. So I think that's a key goal of our mission. We want to get the kids in school and we want to have in-person instruction as much as possible. And we need to have the protocols that we decide we need to address the school community transmission. I also always go back to our mission statement, care for each person, focus on learning, teach and touch the future. One of the things I've really seen in this particular thing that we've been looking at, there are people on opposite side of the mask mandate or using masks. Both of them care for kids. Let's not demonize one side or the other. Both of them care for kids. I mean, there are people who really passionately wrote on the back to school email about, I care for kids and I'm against masks. And there are people who are, I care for kids, I'm very pro-mask. And I read those, and I think both can be true at the same time. You know, we're in this to try to come up with the best plan we can to care for our kids. The second one is learning. We can't lose sight that that's what this is all about. It's not about masking, it's not about distancing, it's not about everything else. How do we create a learning environment and the best learning environment we can? There was a quote said to me, I want to attribute it, but it was said to me, last year I heard from my teacher about my kids' mask use. I wanted to know about my kids' reading comprehension. And it really hit home with me. I mean, we can focus so much on the procedures that we're doing to try to keep kids safe that we lose sight of our primary objective. Get the kids in school, give them a safe environment where they can learn. And then the last one is teach us the future. We need to think about the long-term effects of our decisions. We do. And when I read some of these things about masking, they were talking about long-term effects of things that will happen for kids. And it's not just an immediate thing. It's something we have to think more long-term. So let me talk about some constant elements of the plan. The focus this year is on in-person instruction. We're not looking at running a dual platform of remote and in-person. We're going to focus on in-person instruction. Now, having said that, we do need to work on how to organize and manage kids who are going to be absent. We're going to have kids who are absent because one of the layers of protection is to have kids stay home if they have symptoms. And we also have this thing called remote instruction days that we're going to look at for possibly use during snow days. So we need to know how to manage and organize absences, but we're not going to go back to running the dual platform of both remote and in-person. We're going to focus on in-person, in-school instructions. So if you read the remote instruction procedures, you're going to see that we're going to have increased use of our text tools like Google Classroom and Seesaw to make sure that kids can very quickly see what their day should have been like if they were in school. One of the unintended consequences of last year of making remote and in-person at the same time We have some kids just decide to stay home on days. Hey, I don't feel like going to school today, it's remote, I'll just remote in. We don't want to have that happen again. You know, I found that with substitute teachers sometimes. If you make your substitute teacher pool so great, it's like easy to take a day off. We don't want to make it easy, in this sense, easy in quotation marks, for kids when they say, well, I'll just stay home. I can get the same thing. Oh, we want you in school. School's a great place. That's where your friends are. That's where your social and emotional needs are going to be met, and that's where our best instruction will happen. We do have some remote programs that we're still kind of working on, Prenda, Edgenuity, VLAX. For those people who really want to keep their children full remote, we will work with them. They're still taxpayers, and we will try to work with them to find a solution. But we're not running remote and in person at the same one. So that was the first element of the plan. We're focused on in-person instruction. Vaccinations. Number one best layer of protection. Well, right now they're age limited. They haven't been approved for people under 12. Independent compliance. We can't say you have to be vaccinated to come to school. That is something that the state can do. And even then, people can choose not to be vaccinated and come to public school. They just have to realize they may have to exclude during an outbreak. There are privacy concerns around HIPAA about finding out who's vaccinated and who's not vaccinated. So vaccinations are a good primary purpose. I'm going to tell people that I'm vaccinated and I think you should be too, but I also respect people's rights about vaccinations. It's a medical decision. And so personally, I've been vaccinated all over the place. I was vaccinated as a youngster, and then I went to go to my doctoral program at William & Mary, and they said, hey, produce your vaccination record. I said, can't find it. Oh, call my hometown doctor. No, his office had burnt down. So they said, get revaccinated. I was like, okay, I'll get revaccinated. I get the flu shot all the time. I'm a former biology person. The human immune system is amazing. It's your best defense against any disease. And, you know, being a former biologist, the immune system needs to know how to fight different infections as they come around. I'm pro-vaccine. I respect other people who are not. I respect your ability to make that decision. But personally, vaccinations is probably our best layer of protection. Masks. We're going to talk on, as a layer of protection, about in school. We do have to have masks on buses. That is very clear as a public transportation from CDC, and we do have to have masks on buses. We will not have masks outdoors, nor will we have masks for sports. I haven't heard anything about that going on, but so the real issue that we're talking about is masks for indoors. We will exclude symptomatic people, but we will not quarantine for school exposure. And this is, you know, there's a pretty complicated algorithm in there about exclusion. Our nurses understand it fairly well. They're able to explain it to me. But there's going to be a low level to exclude a systematic student or adult at school. We don't know if your sniffle, your cough, or your upper respiratory symptom is COVID or not. We're going to be very much saying, if you have those, don't come to school. It's a layer of protection. But you won't be quarantined. If there is a student who is beside you, or student or adult who is test positive, the school is not going to do contact tracing, nor is the school going to say, you have to stay out because you were next to a person who was COVID positive. If we do know that, we may inform parents so they don't just self-monitor, but there's no quarantine. We are going to implement what remote instruction days, if you saw it. They're going to be very different because we're not doing remote. We can't just switch like we did last year. And not every snow day will be a remote instruction day. So those are kind of the standards of the plan that come through. I still have to propose a level plan because we need a plan that can flex and change with the environment. We don't know what's going to happen in 2 weeks. Dr. Noble, our infectious disease guy, I talked to him a week ago. He said your COVID environment actually get better at the beginning of September because you may get through that Delta surge and you may be on the backside of it. Or it may get worse, or we don't know. So we do have to have some flexibility. We do have to have levels. No matter what we choose, we need an ability to adapt and change. And the other thing we need is an exit strategy. We need an exit strategy. We need to say at some point, this is going to end completely. And if we start with this level plan, we need to be able to say, when does it end? What are the metrics that we look at where we say we're all done? Whatever we start with for the opening of school, I think we should reassess those decisions, and we can talk about whether that's every 2 or 3 weeks. But I think whatever we start with, we're going to have to take a hard look after 2 or 3 weeks. We can start, and everything could go great, and we can say, okay, let's relax some of our layers. We could start, everything could go south. We could say, let's increase those layers. Guidance. We have guidance all over the place. Guidance from the CDC, guidance from the New Hampshire Department of Health and Human Services. The issue is, this is a decision left squarely at your local level. These people over here at the SAU Board are going to make this decision. There is a patchwork of decisions that have been made all over the state. There are schools coming in fully masked. There are schools coming in no mask. There are schools coming in that have split things. Guidance is guidance. It's good. I look at it, but I have to make my decision in anything. I'm thinking like the legal people give me guidance, and it's like, okay, thanks for the guidance. I still have to make a decision. They have to make a decision. All right, things that we need to consider tonight, or tools to consider in your levels. Masks. I think that's the biggest issue. I think that's why most people are here. Either you're pro-mask or you feel the mask should not be mandated. And there are diverse perspectives. There are diverse perspectives on the board. There are diverse perspectives in our community. And I've read them. Guidance versus mandates. A lot of guidance out there. No one's giving us a mandate. We can make a decision as a local. Required versus recommended. If we say something is required, like mask use is required, we're going to enforce it at school. If we say that kids must wear masks in schools, we will enforce it. If we say that masks are recommended, we will support that. And here's the difficult thing, I think, especially in the older classes. You can tell your child to wear their mask, and when they get to school, they may or may not wear that mask. Because sometimes you send your child to school dressed a certain way, and when they arrive, they're dressed slightly differently. I don't know if you know that, but as kids get older, they make individual choice. And it's going to be hard for us, if we say masks are required, we will enforce it, and we will have the staff reinforce it. If we say masks are recommended, then we're going to support those who wear it. Regardless of what we make, we will support people who choose to wear masks. If you personally choose to wear a mask, we will make sure that you are not made fun of, and we will support you in that decision. Just a little bit different. And then the last one I'm going to talk about is one of the things that I think I've read in the comments is some people have come to believe that the cure is worse than the disease. That the actual wearing of the mask is worse than anything that could happen with COVID. And I thought about this a lot. I'm going to tell you about my wife, Crystal, who I've been married to for 37 years. We met as seniors in high school, started dating. I met her right after she had been through treatment for Hodgkin's lymphoma. And she has had, she has a very compromised immune system. She has, she had radiation, she had chemo, she had a lot of surgeries. She was beat up by the cure. Her body is really beat up by the cure. And we had 4 wonderful children, and I've had 37 marvelous years with her, and she lived. I mean, the cure was tough, the cure was hard, but she lived. And I have that perspective. I think, we can look at the mask and we can say, is the cure that was proposed in the mask worse than the disease? That's a decision you have to make. In my life, I think I'd make the decision that the cure was working. And she lived, and we had children, and it was good. But she was beat up by it, and that's just the way it is sometimes in medicine. All right, last thing I want to talk about, two things I want to talk about. The DHHS rubric. We can look at that rubric. I think there are a number of axes we can look at. We can look at school cases. I think that's very important. We have to look locally, how's that impacting our schools. I think if you look at community spread as one of the axes, you have to look at, do we look at county or do we look at local? I think when you look at Bow and Dunbarton, our rates of vaccination are higher and our incident of COVID are lower than the county as a whole. I think we can look at vaccination rates. I'm not sure that would be a great thing to look at. I mean, originally when I was writing this about a month ago, people were saying vaccination rates would be something to look at when we create a rubric. Now I think they walked away. And the other thing that's buried in the rubric I think we need to look at is the targeted use of masks. You can make a decision that say masks will be used in a specific grade level or a specific classroom or something like that specifically. If there's an outbreak in one of our elementary schools, that doesn't mean everyone has to go to masking in all of our elementary schools. The other thing I think you really need to think about in this plan is the exclusion from school, especially for symptoms. I'm going to make a plea. Please don't yell at our nurses. Had a meeting with them. They're oftentimes the front line. They have to tell people, look, your child has to be excluded because they're showing symptoms. Please be nice to them. They've had a hard year and a half. 2 of them were brand new to the job last year, and they've done a pretty good job. And what they brought up is the interplay of masks and all respiratory infections. So, one of the things we saw last year is just a decrease of all respiratory infections, colds, flu, other things. And if you are going to have an exclusion of kids for symptoms, then cutting out respiratory infections in general will help keep more kids in school. So finally, my recommendation. I've laid out for a framework for the plan. I've left some things in a framework that we made decisions tonight as an SAU board. I believe none of us is as smart as all of us. And I want to thank all of you for your input that has informed me and the board as we work through these decisions. And I hope we have a good discussion tonight and we're respectful to each other, because I think we all have the same thing in mind. We want to do what's best for our kids. We may have a different opinion about what's best, and that's okay. We can work it through. But let's assume positive intentions that the people who are here and speaking tonight wants what's best for our kids and wants our community. Thank you.
Oh, wow.
So, and Bryce is gonna just go over a summary of the comments we got on emails before the meeting, and then we'll open up to comments from people who are here.
Hey folks, Bryce Larrabee here. I guess I'm actually more addressing you guys, given the meeting's supposed to be an SAU board meeting, with people attending them. So the emails we received 122 emails roughly. It's kind of hard to count in some respects because that same email address gets other emails that aren't tied to the school reopening. Interestingly enough, as I look around, frankly, a lot of you are the ones that sent those emails that are in attendance, which is kind of interesting to me. Because I was thinking 122, I don't know, Dwayne, I asked you before, I don't know how many families we have in the district, maybe 800-ish? But frankly, I view that as a pretty high statistical sampling of what the community interests are at that kind of rate. And surprise, it's all over the map, right? The responses and the attitudes that folks have towards this. By my rough calculations, and it's rough because sometimes it's hard to tell with the emails of what folks are thinking in terms of whether they want masks required or not. I found that 27 of the 122 said they want masks optional, essentially in all schools. 35 had said masks K through 12. 29 had said masks basically at BES without addressing the older kids, the kids older than 12 who could be vaccinated. And then we had another 19 that essentially asked questions, didn't really address the mask usage. From those emails, I would say, and again, we kind of went through this process last year. It wasn't about masks last year. Last year was about whether we should be remote or whether we should be in school last year. We had a very similar process. Last year was a lot more contentious. The emails we received, some were pretty rough on the board and some of the attitudes. We did not have anything like that. Every email we got was very nice. Frankly, most of them said, we understand you're in a tough situation. And again, looking around in this room, there are definitely going to be people that are in the no camp, the yes camp, and are not going to be thrilled with whatever happens tonight. But everything we received was very positive. I was surprised there was a number of those emails were from people in education. I'd say 20 to 30 of the 122 were in education. And similarly, in the medical community, doctors and nurses and things that work at different medical facilities. And I would say that the majority of each of those groups were in favor of requiring masks, but not all. There were definitely some teachers that said masks should be an option in all schools. There were definitely some doctors that said that as well. It wasn't uniformly one way or the other with those groups. But those were easily the biggest two groups of emails that we received were from those folks. No surprise, the vast majority of them focused on their own situation. So if you were a parent of kids at Dunbarton Elementary, for the most part, your email was focused on, whether masks should be required at Dunbarton Elementary. There weren't, like I said, there weren't a ton that were kind of school SAU-wide emails. And the emails were all over the board. I mean, some would be one sentence, and others would be page after page of materials, multiple medical documents or journals of medicine on both sides. Why the detriment of wearing masks, and then many that were, why you need to wear masks because of COVID and the medicine behind that. And frankly, I didn't read any that I laughed and like, oh, this person's an idiot. There was nothing like that. Everything in there seemed very well spoken and well versed, and nothing was like loony. And I would say, yeah, a year ago there was some pretty wild stuff, including a Grim Reaper at one point down at the police station. So that's it. If you guys have any questions? And I should say that I know independently the whole board looked at all of those. We at least informally agreed that we're all going to look at every email. So I think if anyone submitted an email, everybody here read it. That's it.
All right, so, yeah, we'll do that, that's fine. So I guess before we open it up to comments from people here, does the board have any questions for the administration, for the dean, about what we proposed?
Yeah, Clem Madden, Dunbarton. So the matrix that you have in there, where would you see how flexible the plan would be? I know the Jenna and Eric and Dean would be the ones making the decisions. We all have medical involvement, not Dr. C, that medical background. Where would you see a triggering event? Because we've had people talk about county level, we've had people talk about town level. Right now, town levels are very, very low in both Dunbar and they're tiny. I mean, like we have 4 cases maybe, and or 6 maybe, and then less than 4 in Dunbar. So my question would be to you guys, how would you envision a triggering event where you might be evaluating that?
You just asked.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, I'm CC'd on those emails, but I don't usually chime in.
So, Eric Schulman. Decision-wise, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that you have us as part of your decision-making group, but you take the final decision regarding that.
Yeah, you're right.
And then, personally, I wouldn't look at such a small group as just as decide whether we have lots of COVID or not too much COVID, only because we don't, as a community, only spend our time in Bow to do a lot of COVID and contracted efforts, or bring it back to our kids, or bring it back to our kids. So, I think it would look a little wider scope than it would be national, and maybe the state line, maybe kind of wider. We could decide what we want to look at, but it probably shouldn't be about a little microphone, just well with Dunbarton, because those small numbers won't tell us when things are doing or not doing sufficiently.
Right, well, I remember last year when we decided on like whether to be in the green or the yellow, we had cases spike because of nursing homes and things like happened. You know, I know there was an email in the inbox about that jumps the county a lot.
I figured, so, and Dean, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it took us a while to.
Microphones, you can't hear a thing back here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Once we
Get the
realized.
microphone.
Does that help?
That's right.
Done.
Just a little close.
Are you guys begin?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
So, and again, Dean, correct me if I'm wrong, but last year, when those nursing home numbers were affecting the numbers we're looking at, it took us a while to realize that it was affecting us. But I think once we realized that, we started to discount those numbers and try to look at numbers that excluded the nursing homes. Dean, is that accurate? You recall? And I would recommend, yeah, that's how we would address things this year if we're able to.
But I think what Clem asked is what would be a triggering event, not what you're looking at. And I guess the question, the answer I give you depends what you adopt tonight. I mean, you can adopt, this is what we're doing for the whole year, and this is what we're doing, and unless, you know, we call an emergency meeting, that's what it's gonna be. If we choose to go with the matrix, remember, that's a choice that we can make tonight, to go with the matrix. Then I think you have to look at what are going to be your axes on the matrix, and what are the triggering events. I would say one of those triggering events would be if there is a change in level identified for whatever locality we decide. Like if we make a decision tonight, and right now we're in substantial, if, again, either county or local we decide, if that changes to below substantial, that would be a triggering event for us to look at. Another triggering event would be something that would change. Right now, we're not in school. So we have sporadic cases without evidence of facility transmission. 2 weeks from now, we could have a cluster, or we could have multiple clusters or a large outbreak. That would be a triggering event for us to look, because that would be on the axis that we would look at. So I think if we adopt the matrix approach, the trigger event to relook at what we're doing has to be with changes on those axes. If not, the other thing you could say is, you make a time down and you say, we're gonna look in 3 weeks, or we're gonna look every 3 weeks to make that decision. But it depends on what you decide tonight as far as the plan. Does that make sense for your question?
Yes, no, it does. I guess I would get to another thing, like, which one would you think is easier to implement? A matrix or just the judgment call? Bryce?
Well, I want to add to that, that question, is there a way to do that with breaking out the nursing homes? I mean, that was a big deal at the time last year. A lot of people were upset that we were moving around colors or that we couldn't because of nursing home numbers. Is there another way to do it besides just vote Dunbarton and Merrimack County, break that out? And does it matter? Because presumably all the people in the nursing homes are vaccinated anyway, so I don't know if it matters. What we're talking about now is remote. Last year was remote versus being in school. This is basically requiring masks versus optional masks, which is really a different question.
I think you have to wait until we have more discussion.
But is there a way to do it? I mean, is there a way you could, what would be the other mechanism besides vote Dunbarton or say Merrimack County? What else could you break it up by if you're excluding certain groups within Merrimack County? I don't know.
Dwayne thinks there's a way to do it.
Yeah, I think-
Dwayne says there's a way to.
Well,
I think on the state website now, they identify specific outbreaks, like there's an outbreak right now in one of the county jails. So you can see that on the state website now, whatever county that, I don't know that it's Merrimack County, but, and you can pull that number out, like they've identified that that's, because those people in jail are not generally spreading it to the general population. So I think the state website that lists all the numbers is much better than it was when we were dealing with this a year ago. I do have a question too about the reopening plan, because I've thought about this a lot too. Is there a way that it doesn't have to be a universal matrix for K through 12? Is there ability to do? Oh, you do have it in there.
Yep, you can different, this is a total local decision. You can decide whatever you want to do. You want to move to public comment or question?
Yeah, my comment's not going to be very helpful. But I would hope that we would take a more nuanced approach to looking at data. And if we have a matrix that just says, we're going to look at data in Merrimack County, what's our community transmission, and make our decisions based on that, that may be not an appropriate matrix to use, or data point to use. For example, Dunbarton, we've got Hillsborough County to our west and to our south. So does Hillsborough County data come into play? I would hope that you'd look or give more weight to what's happening right in the communities and less weight to what's happening out in the counties. And again, try to seek out some of those hot points that you mentioned, where there might be breakouts and so forth, but use some judgment, giving more weight to what's going on right here in our communities versus what's happening out in the counties.
So I will open this up for public comment. I guess maybe, go to that microphone there if you want to speak, please say, do you have to say that?
They didn't say their name and their address.
And then I will also say that I do realize based on the emails we got that there is a wide variety of feelings and emotions, and it's a very emotional issue. So if we could please be respectful and also maybe try to limit to 3 minutes or so that we're not going on and on. That would be really helpful.
So people on the Google Meet, you are muted right now. If you want to comment, you'll have to raise your hand. You'll have to shut off here so that you can comment. So the mic is open.
Hello. My name is Kyle Fellers. I live on 9 Crockett Drive. I have 2 children in the school district. I have family who have issues. I have a parent that has dementia. I have an older sister with special needs, a litany of issues. I have an older brother with type 1 diabetes. So that's where I'm coming from. I'd like to thank the board for allowing the public to respond and contribute to this discussion, and my fellow citizens here and on Google Meet. We teach our children that facts matter, and that's why we send them to school. The facts are that masks don't work against viruses, and prior to 2020, we had 40 years of scientific data backing up this assertion. We know that states that have mask mandates have the same trajectories of COVID as states that do not have mask mandates, and in some cases, worse. We know the seasonal flu is much more deadly than COVID for our children, yet we never had mask mandates for the seasonal flu. We also know that mental illness across the age spectrum has risen sharply in the past 18 months. Mask mandates sends a message to our children that the air is toxic and that everyone around them is sick. That message drives isolation and distrust among our kids, which are major factors in depression. All for a virus that has a 1 in a million chance of killing kids under the age of 25. This is unacceptable. If we really want to impact and slow COVID, we need to focus on mitigating the risk factors. We know that obesity is the biggest factor in determining a COVID outcome. According to the CDC data, as of March 2021, 78% of COVID-related deaths and hospitalizations were attributed to obesity. We know that roughly 43% of Americans are obese, according to 2017-2018 CDC data, an increase from 30% since 2000. That's almost 50% increase since 2000. We know that 34 million Americans have diabetes, with 9 out of 10 cases being type 2 diabetes, a disease of choice. We know that approximately 655,000 Americans die every year of heart disease and 600,000 die of cancer, and that obesity is the biggest factor in these diseases and outcomes. We need to encourage our entire community to move more and eat better. We all need to personally make a commitment to do this, and this board needs to design a plan to encourage our kids to do the same while at school. This will improve all quality of life and reduce the risk of poor outcomes. Not if, but when we each contract this virus. Every single person in this room is going to get this virus, whether you're vaccinated or not. And it's time we all come to that conclusion. Placing mask mandates on our children is a symbolic security blanket that does nothing to stop the spread of this virus. It creates unintended consequences that will have long-term significance on our children and society as a whole. It provides a false sense of security that may very well encourage conditions in which allows this virus to thrive. I reject these mask mandates for my children, and I encourage this board to do so as well. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Roxana Scarpino, and I'm a resident at 36 Chandler Circle. Probably have sent you guys a couple of emails, so it's nice to meet you all in person. So I'm going to keep it short. I wrote an email, so masking in the school setting. I'm not pro or against. If you decide to wear a mask, that is your choice. Dr. Cascadden, you mentioned choice in the story that you shared with us. So my ask is that you allow parents to choose whether or not they'd like to send their children to school with a mask. So I do think we have ample evidence that shows that the school setting is not a setting of high transmission. I also think that cloth masks are not protective against COVID-19 based on studies done in the past. And further, our children have been attending the Bow Youth Summer Camp or Bow Rec Summer Camp without a mask, socializing, having fun, and we have yet to see an outbreak in that setting as well. So my ask is that you allow parents to choose whether or not their children go to school with a mask. You also mentioned that you will not be quarantining in the school setting. So to me, it doesn't seem like there's any harm in allowing parents to make that choice. Second, I wanted to comment on the decision matrix. Dr. Cascadden mentioned that this is optional. I would encourage you to review that decision matrix and to discuss really what are we using as triggering factors. The nursing home is a great example, and in Governor Sununu's most recent address, he mentioned an outbreak at the state prison. Personally, I believe that you should look at what's going on in the school, and nothing else should matter. There's been no widespread community outbreak linked to a grocery store, a restaurant, a movie theater, or anything else. I think that really decisions need to be made based upon what is going on within the school. And third, green and yellow levels. It was extremely difficult for us to move back into a lesser level, if you will, last year. And that was really challenging for a lot of parents. I'm a registered nurse. It was very difficult to kind of, play teacher and go to work, and then my husband's a firefighter, so not jobs that, we can just kind of be available and be at home. Especially to your point earlier, Dr. Cascadden, my daughter was guilty. Can I just stay home and do remote learning? You're right, it is not the same kind of learning. And I know that that's not on the table this year, and I'm thankful for that. But I really do feel like when we're looking at levels or when you're looking at decisions in matrix, as easy as it is to flip into something that is more restrictive, it should be as easy to flip into something that is least restrictive. So I really ask that you consider that when you're doing a matrix. If you choose to adopt it at all, which is not something that you have to do, this is your decision. The other thing somebody said, COVID isn't going away. So, my time's probably running short, but perhaps you institute certain measures and you throw away levels altogether. You don't have to use a level matrix. You can institute one or two measures that is easy to flip in and out of. And fourth, I would like to know if you will be accepting home testing for COVID-19 kits. My daughter missed the last couple of days of school because she wasn't feeling well. She did not have COVID, but she had possibly kept her home. The home test is really easy to do, and I'm hoping that you will consider it this year. I believe it was considered last year, so I hope that we continue with that. Thank you.
My name is Ross Funches. I live in 16 Vancouver. I have 4 children that attend in the Bow School District. First, I want to say thank you to the board. I'm new to Bow. I've only lived here 3 years, and a lot of it seems to be taken up by COVID. I'm impressed with how you have worked through this challenge. I will confess quickly that I am not happy with all of your decisions, but I recognize that you genuinely want to do what's best for the community. And for that, I want to say thank you. I want to thank you for your hard work and for your diligence and for caring for my children as much as I care for my children. So thank you. you've got a tough decision. There's really not gonna be anyone that's happy with you. You're gonna make a decision tonight, and I'm probably not gonna agree with you 100%. I would like to talk about the cure. With my 4 kids, 2 of my children, they didn't really like the cure. They didn't like wearing masks, they didn't like doing the remote stuff that you guys implemented last year. It was tough on them. For my other 2 children, it was devastating. It was absolutely devastating to watch them fall further and further behind. So here's my ask for you guys tonight. Please make it as least restrictive as possible while still looking out for the best interests of the children. And you're not gonna make me happy unless we do no masks forever. But that won't make a difference for the parents who need those masks. That's my ask. Please make it as least restrictive as possible. 2 of my children desperately need to be in class with no mask. Thank you.
Good evening, Anthony, but 3 Line Hill Road. Dean, I just want to say thanks for the goals. I think that's a good to have an objective. And are those posted anywhere where we could all see them? Maybe up in town so we can at least all have the same focus. You mentioned a few there. I don't know if I've seen those in an email or anything. That'd be great if you could.
I'll talk to you after about what you're talking about, because you mean the goals of the plan.
The goals you listed tonight on your, you were talking about.
Yeah, they're in the plan.
They're in the plan? Those are highlighted? Okay.
Yeah, they're in the plan.
I think maybe just a list of those, not so much of a long dissertation, but yeah, and just a list of the goals. And then, so the other question, you mentioned about the requirement of masks. Is there an actual written rule or something that we can see for this mandate for the school buses? There is an actual.
They're actually in the opening plan on the computer too.
Wait, you don't know
That's
that? These
a,
are transportation, but it is, CDC has made that, and again, there are some people who don't believe we should listen to CDC, so put that out. But CDC is that all public transportation needs a mask, and they have included school buses.
so I know.
You're going to an airport.
Yeah, I've been to the airport a while lately, it's a nightmare. You walk into a restaurant and eat with no mask, and you walk down the air aisles, and it's like, somehow there's a wall that doesn't pass between the tables. A little history, I've been, in the last couple of years, I left Bagram, Afghanistan, I went to Kuwait, I commingled with about 5,000 people on a base in Kuwait for 2 weeks waiting for a flight home. Then I flew with 400 people on a 747 to Fort Bliss, Texas, and spent 2 more weeks quarantining with them. And then I left on a commercial flight and took 3 different stops getting back here and quarantined for 2 more weeks. I know all the masks and everything, and when I left Afghanistan, I actually left Herat, which was the Italian base. And as we all know, the disease pretty much started between Wuhan and the textile factories in Italy. And I mean, they had the quarantine procedures and everything, so I never saw anything and haven't been sick or recently diagnosed with COVID since. So I wonder sometimes, I know people had it, and I'm not saying it's not out there, but I'm just saying that the fear level that we all seem to have gotten caught up in it, maybe a little over-generated, or maybe we were overreacting. That being said, have we got statistics that we're using from last year, like kids that actually caught the disease? How many of them were sick and actually had maybe I don't think anybody in the town passed from the disease this year, right? Or they know, maybe somebody caught it, but everybody's recovered. So just when we make these decisions, we're being proactive and thinking, all right, how bad is this? Do we need to mask up? Does the cure, like I said before, warrant what we're doing? That's the question I have to ask myself. Looking back from what we've learned, apply that to this year might be a good idea. No, I'm a concerned parent. I've got 2 girls that I hate to see them masked up. I feel like you got once in a while, they don't get to see their friends. I really think it should be left to us as parents, if you're concerned. And I mean, we're willing to sign a waiver if it needs to be, that will take the responsibility away from the school board, that might help. That's a possible decision. There's quite a bit of evidence we've talked about that, on both sides, that I believe more masks is not really a benefit, more of a feel-good device. It really causes more harm, I think, physically and psychologically for our children. But if a child feels more comfortable wearing masks, I'm not against it. I think that's fine. It goes back to choice. I think for Americans, we should have the ability to make a free choice. It should be for us as kids, as parents, that we make that choice for our kids. And then if my kid wants to wear it, I can say, look, if you want to wear a mask, go ahead. It's your choice. I'm not going to tell them you don't have to. It was a difficult year last year. There's a lot of detrimental issues. You know, you get to rebreathe your own gases, you get to trap bacteria on the mask, you're rebreathing. Make it hard to see physical cues when you type. As you get older, it's hard to hear, and somebody's talking, you can't understand what the person's saying because they have a mask on. Some of the respiratory issues you can catch from wearing a mask are more deadly than COVID-19. I think someone already mentioned that wearing a mask is actually useless against the thinning of microorganisms. It might stop the spit that it travels on, but it's not going to stop the microorganism. You know, I don't believe it's even constitutional to mandate we have to wear a medical device in any environment. They're kind of dehumanizing. Healthcare professionals in sounding alarms say they mask do more harm than good. There are countless doctors and epidemiologists that speak of the measures of mask. In spite of faithful mask wearing, 70% of positive COVID cases but still contracted the virus. They're ineffective against, if masks are effective, in 50 years, if we were getting flu vaccination, why are we wearing masks then? It's the same thing, COVID-19 is a flu, it's an influenza virus. Why haven't we been wearing masks for the last 50 years? I think one of the things I saw most recently was a video from the doctor that talked to Dr. Dan Stockton from Mount Vernon, Ohio, brought up the concerns about mask wearing. I think he said better than I did. I probably bumbled a little bit through this tonight because it's not easy to speak, but there are a lot of good people out there making good decisions. I think that we probably ought to just evaluate where we're at and see, does the benefit of wearing a mask and forcing kids to wear a mask outweigh the psychological and health ramifications that we're getting because of it? So, and that being said, I'll let the next person say. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Alexander Forster, and I live at 69 Round Hill. I'm a certified pediatric clinical care nurse, and I work mostly in ORs. I'm hearing a lot about how there's a virus and always kind of be around, and it might actually, it's probably going to be around forever, but the point is that you're supposed to be wearing a mask now while people are still not eligible for vaccines, and while there is, the Delta variant. It's just kind of get a grip on things now that we can go about our normal lives with COVID still, but it's not this detrimental to hospitals, and the outcomes aren't as poor as they have been, especially these past couple of weeks. My son's in kindergarten. He wears a mask, no problem out in public, and he's not afraid because we educate him, like what you're supposed to do with medicine. And my concern is my son being in kindergarten, not eligible for vaccine, how kids in kindergarten kind of sneeze in each other's faces, that I feel at that age, until they can get the vaccine, that should be an option, especially since I'm pregnant. And we are seeing, pregnant women who are being admitted to the hospital, intubated with emergency C-section crash carts with them. So I just hope that you take into consideration what the Academy of American Pediatrics is recommending for those age groups.
Hi guys, Jared Bland, you're in the book. I want to share a quick story with you guys, and then I want to ask a question, and I hope you'll bear with me. So, back in 2019, we dropped my middle son, my oldest son, off at the bus, and we waved goodbye. This was his first day of kindergarten. It was a beautiful day. We were so excited. We were off and running. We made it exactly 1 hour before we got a phone call from the school nurse, and it was, "Mr. Bland, can you come to the school? You got to pick your son up. He threw up on the bus." Okay, all right. So we get there. I pick him up. He's bouncing off the walls already. Everything looks fine. I take him home. We wait the X amount of days. He comes back. We take him on the bus again. Same thing the next time. 1 hour later, we get a phone call. "Mr. Bland, you have to come pick your son up." My son was getting motion sick. Now I'm asking, do any of you guys sitting there right now, do any of you guys know that my son was getting motion sick? My point being, you guys don't know how to handle my son. This is a personal health issue that should be taken up by each individual family. And I love you guys and I respect you guys, but this is a personal choice that every family should have the ability to make on their own. And I don't feel that any one of you sitting up there tonight should be responsible for the health choices that I make with myself and with my family. You guys are all sitting up there tonight, with the exception of Mr. Osterloh. You guys are elbow to elbow, nose to nose. He's the only one wearing a mask. You guys made that choice tonight. I don't know if you're vaccinated. I don't care if you're vaccinated. You guys made that choice on your own. You guys standing up there, if you guys make a choice tonight that I personally have to mask up my child, you've taken that choice away from me. That's not fair. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Judson Malone from 7 Audley Divide. I'm going to be much more brief. I want this to be a personal health decision for me and my family. We believe that's our right to make that decision, and sending our children to school under these mandates is painful for all of us. As far as when you're analyzing data, I would suggest that analyzing very local data, we're talking about our schools in our communities, analyze the local data for our towns. Thank you. That's all.
I'm Catherine Berg, and I live at 112 Knox Road. I have 4 kids in the Bow District, 2 at the elementary school, 2 at the middle school. Honestly, where you're not going to be requiring quarantining after school exposure, I'm fairly ambivalent on the mask issue. However, I have major concerns about how the children that do have to quarantine are going to be handled. One of the goals in the opening plans and in the plans over the whole year previously was seamless learning between the learning models. I am exceptionally concerned that without any sort of remote support, children that are quarantining are going to be left behind. I have some kids that'll be fine and some that wouldn't. And additionally, in the opening plan, it says that unvaccinated children would need to quarantine for 20 days from the onset of symptoms of a household member, where the DHS guidance is 10 days from their last exposure. So I'm curious as to why we're not being given the last exposure option. I know a lot of people in this community, like we have the opportunity, we can put the sick child in the master bedroom with the master bathroom, we can keep our other children away and they can go back to school 10 days earlier. A 20-day quarantine could keep kids out that aren't sick and they're fine for 16 days, and that's almost 10% of the school year. So that's 10% of the school year that I don't feel like there's a plan put forth to adequately support those children in their learning, and I'm concerned that with staff being in and out, I'm concerned that there's not going to be the support there to help them get back on track when they return. So those are my concerns.
Say I'm a little disappointed there's no stool over here. My name's Jen Flecker. I live on 6th Branch on the Notre Turnpike. And really, to be honest with you, I can kind of go left or right with this whole mask mandate thing, but my concern is my daughter who's on an IEP and is a little behind in reading. And with reading comes language. And if she can't see and work with the teacher and how they're speaking and enunciating and all that stuff, it kind of really does hold her back. And she has fallen back a little further when we first did this, not last year, but the year before. And then she was able to gain some progress when she went back. But really, I'm a little afraid if we have to continue this with the mask, because if she can't continue that little bit of progress that she gained, but she's still already behind, and she's not gonna gain anymore, she's just gonna continue to fall behind. So, masks are great for those who choose it, and those who don't, that's their choice, that's fine, but, in the educational setting, some people need to be able to see the faces to be where they need to be.
Seth Fingery, 36 Pinnacle Lane. I'm a teacher at Global Memorial School and also now the co-president of the BEA. I just wanted to speak on a couple issues. And first, I want to say thank you to the board and thank you to Dr. Cascadden and administrators. Over the summer, I reached out to our membership and solicited their feedback on the original opening plan. And we got lots of feedback coming in. Out of our membership, we had over 40 people send lengthy emails. Probably some of them actually sent some messages into the back to school account as well. And they were pretty uniform. And I put together some messages to dean and administration, and a lot of those issues we were able to work through, so I wanted to say thank you. A lot of them are off the table now, and that's terrific. There are a couple things that I just wanted to quickly address, and one of them is masking. You might notice I'm not masked right now. I don't really like to wear a mask. I haven't worn a mask all summer. I don't want to go back to wearing a mask. But I do want our kids in person all year. And what I heard over and over and over again from teachers, and it wasn't uniform, there are teachers who don't want to put a mask on again. There's no doubt, and I heard from those teachers, and I kind of respect that. I don't want to put one on either. But we want to preserve in-person education, and that's the best way to teach your kids. Even though there's a loss having in-person education with a mask, having your students at home, because we're all forced to be at home because the outbreak necessitates that, means that there's a learning loss for everybody. So the position of the BEA would be that we be masked and be universally masked. I think the majority of our membership believes that's the case. And that's a sacrifice on their part. They don't want to be masked. Most of them say they don't want to be masked. But they say that they're willing to be masked to keep your kids in school. The other point I wanted to make is it's a more technical issue related to quarantines. If staff need to quarantine, I would like to respectfully request that they be treated as they were last year, and it's treated as paid administrative leave. And I think it's going to be exceedingly rare that staff quarantine this year if things stay as they are. But it's entirely possible that guidance will change. COVID is being transmitted between vaccinated individuals. We had some staff members last year who were required to quarantine multiple times. They were exposed at school. It was very fair, and I would appreciate that the board adopted a program last year that allowed them not to be penalized in terms of their sick leave, because they would burn through all their sick leave. Some of them needed to use the sick leave bank, and so I think it's fair for them to be able to use paid administrative leave this year. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Susan Montesanti. I live at 18 Avenue. I really appreciated what people had to say. I think that I'm not really understanding what our last person said about the fact that the teachers want to be masked in order to keep the kids in school. I don't really think that those two thoughts go together. The teachers have, like he said, I would imagine most of them have been vaccinated. They know that kids, we know that they are virtually risk-free and not spreading the virus. I'm just not sure. You know, I'll have to tell you, I was a teacher in Concord. I taught for over 40 years, kindergarten, where lots of germs are spread. And actually, I also got COVID recently in January. I got it, my husband got it. I'm in the high risk range because I'm over 65. And we all did very well with that, and I thank God that he got me through it. And I feel that I have a great natural immunity, as well as does our daughter who has cancer. She got it, she had to go off her treatment, and she also has that immunity. I just think that it sounds to me, listening to the BEA representative, that it's just another cop-out. I really do wonder if they want what they want. I think that we know well enough that it's not a serious problem. You're not going to get rid of the virus. It's going to be something else, and it is something that we need to live with. And I think we need to go on with being as normal. I liked what Dr. Cascadden said. I think he makes a lot of good sense. We need to go on in the least restrictive environment that we can, leaving the decision to parents. Parents need to be able to make their decisions for their kids. Thank you.
Would you humor me and allow me to speak again?
Sure.
Thank you. Just to respond to that, I think our faculty is overwhelmingly vaccinated. NEA estimates that more than 90% of teachers in New Hampshire are vaccinated. This is not about a concern about our personal safety. It's about a concern about what virus we're going to do a school do in terms of the functioning of that school. Eventually, it'll become very difficult to operate, and we'll be forced to go into a remote setting because we cannot carry on typical operations. And that's why I would recommend using universal masking, even though I don't like wearing a mask. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Christopher Lenz, and I live at 10 Rain Road. Somebody stole my observation when I walked in this room and looked around and saw an overwhelming percentage of us are unmasked. I looked at the school board panel and see one mask. I'm going to speak tonight from 3 perspectives. First, being a bonus parent. None of my own children attend school in Bow, but my 2 bonus boys do. I'm going to speak tonight as an engineer. And I'm going to speak tonight as a student athlete coach. So as a bonus parent, obviously I want what's best for my children. And we as a family have decided that we are not going to live in fear of this virus anymore. I can't say that I started there, because in February 2020, I was in the hospital with my second fight of colorectal cancer. And so I was clearly immunocompromised. 3 weeks later, everything shut down due to COVID. I was a person that was very cautious in my professional capacity in my job. We had heard about the virus from our global supply chain conversations. And so we were aware. But then when it struck, it kind of took us a little bit by surprise even then. And we had to comply. And I was nervous because here I was home recovering. I was even that guy that posted a picture of an aquarium half filled with Mentos and half filled with Coca-Cola, with a hand on the divider in the middle, right before school started last year, thinking, oh crap, here we go, this is going to be a disaster. The engineer in me is also a data analyst. I'm a problem solver. We don't try to make things that are simple more complex. We actually try to do the reverse. So one ask that I would have, as I heard talking about some matrices and whatnot, it strikes me as trying to make something that should be a very simple decision much more complex than it need be. So when I go back to my role as an engineer and a problem solver and a data analyst, the data has told me not to live in fear of this virus. It is interesting to me to hear the VA representative speak about the high percentage of vaccinated teachers in our schools. I don't recall hearing any super spreader events coming from any school systems in our country. I could be wrong. I just don't remember hearing it. I certainly don't remember hearing any stories last year of any super spreader events in our school system, in our schools. So as the data started to tell a different story, and I always tell my team all the time, the data doesn't lie, just give me the data. Take the emotions out of it, just give me the data. The data does not tell a lie. The data tells the truth. And the data tells me that we're overcomplicating a very simple situation. Do we have an issue, yes or no? No, we don't have an issue. We've heard the board talk amongst yourselves a couple of times tonight that there is no massive spread issues at the moment. If there are, then we need to address those, and we will, I'm sure. I'm sure there will be an emergency meeting to address those issues. But many other people that have talked have asked about having personal choice. I think it should be my choice. It should be my choice to do a lot of things with my children. I don't want the school board to replace what happens at my kitchen table. So I want to add and close for my role as a student athlete coach. I'm not a teacher, I'm not in a classroom. I have not yet met one student athlete who tells me they'd like to wear a mask. I have many friends who are teachers. I have not met one of them that told me they wanted to wear a mask or thought that it was an effective tool during their teaching time. I can tell you that my classroom is between white lines. And there is no way I am more effective wearing a mask, teaching my kids how to play a game, how to be better humans. So I would ask the school board to look within yourselves and just ask yourselves, do we have a massive problem whereby putting a mask in front of children that lose their visual cues entirely, is that effective? Is it helpful? Does it help us teach and educate our children, which is our primary role? Yes, we want to keep them safe. But our primary role is to teach them, and masks do not help that situation at all. Thank you.
Is there anyone on the Google Meet, and this may mess us up a little bit. If there's anyone on the Google Meet that wants to make a public comment, do I ask them to raise their hand, or do you just ask them, can you raise your hand? Do you have a raise hand option?
And where can people find, there are some questions as to where they can find the Google Meet link.
The Google Meet link is in the meeting posting, which is on like the SAU calendar, the Dunbarton calendar, school calendar, the Dunbarton calendar. If you want to, if there's someone on the Google Meet list not unmute, just talk. All right, we're going to move forward. We have someone standing at the microphone. That's still an option. We'll do that again when there's not going to stand. Let's go back forward.
My name is Scott Belrose. I live in Dunbarton at 28 Long Farm Road. I want to thank you guys for giving us the opportunity to speak today. I think it is really important to hear from the community and from a real diverse crowd of people that have a lot of different viewpoints on these issues that we're confronted with and we've been confronted with for the past 18 months. I did prepare a little speech today. I'm not a public speaker, but I'll do my best. I'd like to as I said, thank you guys for the opportunity to speak today. It's my intention to speak a few words, quoting a letter written by General John Stark, to which our state motto was designated, part of John Stark's toast, live free or die. In the letter written by General John Stark to the committee, having charge of the celebration of the Battle of Bennington, General John Stark wrote, "It is my orders now, and will be my last orders to all volunteers to look well to their centuries, for there is a dangerous British party in this country, lurking in their hiding places, more dangerous than all of our foreign enemies. And whenever they shall appear openly to render the same account of them that was given at Bennington, let them assume what name they will, not doubting that the ladies will be as patriotic in furnishing every aid as they were at Bennington in 1777, who even dismantled their beds to furnish cords to secure and lead them off. I'd like to ask everyone today, to which side do you stand? Liberty or the hidden enemy? Information has come out many months ago for some time that this pandemic has been planned and Americans deserve to know the truth. I have not supported the numerous bills and acts which have been coming out at a rapid pace all last year, while the media is propagating deceptive reporting to which there has been an increase in virus hysteria and government spending. Contact tracers violate our God-given right to live as free men in this great country. I ask you to strongly consider what your actions are creating for all of the Americans in this great country. We have a Constitution, and the Declaration of Independence was created for a reason. Do not forget General John Stark's words, live free or die. Death is not the greatest of evil. I'd also like to say Benjamin Franklin once said, those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. I believe this to be the truth, and as I see what has been unfolding in the past months, this is exactly the situation we now face. More government workers to track and trace taxpaying Americans is not the solution, and inevitably will lead to conflict and separation of families, which is stated in the law. Our elected officials need to remember the state to which all Granite Staters call home, and the motto to which some have forgotten, live free or die. Before I finish, I'd just like to mention there have been many doctors around the world trying to speak out against all of this, and they've been speaking that there are effective treatments for this that have been suppressed, and if they were not suppressed, there was no need for a emergency use authorization of this vaccine, and none of this ever would have happened. In my opinion, I think all this has turned into a big mess, and I think we just need to scrap all these plans and just move forward, forget all of the levels. I also want to mention that there is a website, you just do a search, America's Frontline Doctors. They have preventative treatments for this, not only for before you get sick, it's also for people that are now getting sick from being vaccinated. And I'd just like to give that information to everybody so everyone can make that informed decision for themselves and make that choice without information, and to understand that there are effective treatments that are being suppressed. There are many people that are dying needlessly that do not need to because of the suppression of this information. Thank you.
Hi, I know I've already spoken once, but someone else came up, so I was hoping I could have another minute. I just wanted to comment, Roxanne Scarpino, there's a channel circle. I wanted to comment, just on the, comments from our VA representative. I don't feel that it's fair to state that the teachers want in-person learning and masks is the only way to do that. I think that, again, masks should be optional. I think what we're here to discuss is in-person learning regardless. So I wanted to point that out. In terms of universal masking, I think if you're looking at mask mandates, you could consider having adults wear masks, considering that they are much higher spreaders than children are. To earlier points, all teachers have been vaccinated, that have wanted to be vaccinated, which again is their choice. They can choose to get vaccinated or not. Lastly, as far as quarantining, I think that the VA has been very fortunate to have such a supportive community and a board. I don't recall, at least myself, being able to have paid sick leave when quarantined because my child has been quarantined. So again, I really would like to point that out. Thank you.
Okay, I've had a number of people join in the Google Meet, and I believe some of them would like to talk, so what do we need to do to make that happen?
Just have them raise your hand, and then you can acknowledge them, and I'll
If you
mute
would
my
like to
system.
raise your hand, we have a raise, those are all raised hands. So Melanie Clunk, I think it's you, can you unmute yourself, and we'll see if we can hear you.
Hi, thank you everybody for taking my call, and thank you everybody for being so involved in this important discussion. I wanted to first state to thank you to the board to let us all weigh in on this. I think having an indoor meeting with without masks mandated might have also naturally selected for certain people to attend and others not to. However, I'm glad that I can make this comment now. I would like to state that I agree that in our community and our schools, we have not had some major outbreaks, and that's great. But also, perhaps that's because we were wearing masks. My children also have worn masks the entire time that they were in school, and they did not mind it at all. They actually had to be reminded to take their masks off after school. I know a lot of parents who also said that. I also supplied multiple masks so that we didn't have an issue with them not being sanitary, because they would just change them often throughout the day. I think that there's also the concern that kids being in school wearing masks might make it hard for them to learn. And I'm sure that there are some people that they might have a specific case where that is the situation. I think for a lot of students, that is not the situation. I think that being out of school in the remote schooling option which was wonderful, and I think that the staff was amazing. They did everything they could to support our families and our students. However, remote schooling, especially for younger kids, is just not very successful, I think. So having them in school is probably the most important thing for us. And if having masks on can keep them safer and keep them in school, I think that that's better also for people who have to work. We have shown now with the Delta variant that people who are vaccinated can shed enough viral load to pass on COVID. So that's another thing also to consider. I really appreciate you guys taking my call. Thank you all. Have a great night.
Thank you, Melanie. Would you please mute to H? You can unmute now, please.
Thank you, sorry, can you hear me all right? Okay, I would like to just echo what the last speaker said, that I do think that a lot of people appreciated having the opportunity to send their kids to school and have the remote option available. I think that having masks mandated would ensure that there are no super spreader events that happen in the future, and that it will keep not only our children, but also our families and the rest of the community safer. I know I have 2 kids that go to the middle school, and my father needs a lung transplant. And I know that a lot of people have told you how it's not a big deal, but I can assure you that if my father gets it, he's dead. And I appreciate the live free or die logo that some people choose to live their life by, but I don't appreciate it when they make that choice for others, and exposing my children to something like that would kill my father as a result. So anything that you can do would be appreciated. I feel like wearing a mask is the very least you could do, and I would appreciate you considering other people and their families and their situations when you make this decision, and knowing that it could have life or death consequences for people. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Chip, you're up. You can unmute.
Great, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. We protect our students in the community from all sorts of diseases like chickenpox, measles, and polio by requiring vaccines. We protect students from nut allergies by requiring other students to eat differently and sit differently. We don't tell them that they have to stay home if they're afraid. We don't tell them that they have to find ways to protect themselves. We have policies in place to do that. Unfortunately, in this case, we're not allowed to require the vaccine. We're not allowed to tell people who choose not to be vaccinated that to take additional precautions to protect the rest of us. The only tool available, as far as I can tell, is masking. And so this board has an obligation to find whatever tools at their disposal to protect individuals in the schools and in the community. And in this case, that is universal masking. There are people right now in Bow today, fully vaccinated people, who are sick because of exposure to people who chose not to be vaccinated. That's not their fault. This is something that we really need to address by having policies in place. And so until we can require the vaccine, until we have a 100% vaccine requirement, we need a 100% mask requirement. It's that simple. And I'll leave my comments there because it's that simple.
Is there anyone else before we go back to the mic, is there anyone else online? I don't know if I see all of you as far as if you have a raised hand. Anyone else with a raised hand online? You can just unmute and talk if you wanted to. All right, and still the opportunity if someone raises their hand online, I'll go back to you, but we have 2 people at the mic. 3 people at the mic. Roy, did you switch rows?
Yep.
Do I need to do anything?
Nope, you're good.
I'd like to speak to the last speaker. There's these thoughts that the unvaccinated are spreading this virus. There is no basis in this argument, and this is being perpetrated by the media, propagated, I should say, by the media, all over. This, in my opinion, is looking to divide our country right now amongst the vaccinated and unvaccinated. And this is not a good situation that we find ourselves in right now. The only way we get out of this is if we just stop listening to what the media is telling everybody. As far as I can see, the media is bought and paid for by these pharmaceutical companies who are pushing these drugs, okay? They are legal drug dealers. When they're talking about booster vaccines right now, okay? If you guys can't see what is happening right now, it is beyond me to get you to understand what is happening, okay? You've all maybe taken the vaccine, you might be fine right now, but I'm telling you right now, you all need to understand that you're all in danger, just like every one of us that has to deal with all of this. You can laugh and smirk all you want and think you're protected by injecting an experimental gene therapy vaccine in your body and putting a mask on and trying to make pretend that you're doing the right thing, okay? This is not good. We need to stop all of this. And okay, if you guys don't even realize, we're all here today because of the issues that you have all created for all of us, as far as I can see.
You're telling me something that I'm doing, we're really looking at a local decision.
We're here to discuss masks and if
Yes,
they
and the last speaker, I'm not sure if they were even from Dunbarton, they did not disclose where they live, okay? What I want to say is, this argument that unvaccinated are spreading is in no scientific basis behind it, okay? We need to just get together as a community and actually work together and not try and point the finger that the unmasked are spreading, that the masks are doing the right thing. I agree with everyone that believes that this is a personal choice for them as parents and their children, and what they want to send their kids to school in is their choice. We have a dress code. As long as they follow the dress code, masks should not be part of this. Thank you.
So the mic's still live.
So I do respect, the audience here, and again, my fellow citizens are their viewpoints and opinions. But one thing I wanted to address is the gentleman from BEA. There is a New England Journal of Medicine article that's come out recently. I'm happy to send it to the board, where they studied Sweden, which had no lockdowns, no mask mandates. They studied 1.95 million children in Sweden between November 2019 and February 2020, prior to the whole blow up of COVID. Of the study of 1 to 16-year-olds, 65 of these children died in that period of time. The same group, March 2020 to June 2020, at the outbreak of the virus, again, ages 1 to 16, there were 69 children who died in that time frame. So 4 above the previous quarter. They had 15 children with COVID that entered the hospital to the ICU unit. 4 were aged 1 through 6, 11, 7 through 16. 4 of those 15 had underlying conditions, and not one child died because of or with COVID. So of those 69 children that died, none of them died from COVID in that period of time. In that same period of time, the teachers of Sweden, there was 20 school teachers in Sweden which received intensive care for COVID-19 in that period of time. That's 20 teachers out of 103,596 teachers. And it turned out that was lower than the average of other professions that had to go into the hospital for COVID. Again, I'm happy to send the data and the link. It's the New England Journal of Medicine.
Hello, my name is Carrie Anderson, and I'm at 38 Overlook Drive in Dunbarton.
I was actually here in the winter, to speak with the board, about the, returning back to school. And I have to thank you all for making the priority and the goal for the students to be in person. I think it's, I'm so happy that that's the priority because both my kids suffered last year, with having, hybrid and remote learning. Just to give you a little bit of background, my husband, Dr. Cascadden spoke about his wife and the choices that they made in order to make sure that she came out of her treatments fine. My husband was a stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma survivor. He's in the high risk category as far as contracting COVID. I have 2 kids. One has an IEP. One loved being at home because he knew he could finish his schoolwork by 10 a.m. and have the rest of the day to do, video games. But I want you guys to kind of really think about what we've been doing since school got out. Looking through the community as I'm walking to stores, walking anywhere. My kids have been at various sports camps, art camps. We've gone on vacations. I would say at least 90%, if not more, families, parents, children, grandparents, the whole 9 yards. People aren't wearing masks, okay? And I want us to now look at what is our community doing, okay? Our community is not wearing masks, okay? And what are our numbers? So when you're looking at that matrix tool, if you choose to use that, I think you have to define what the community is, okay, number 1. Number 2, masks, okay? The cloth masks, whether you get something at the store with cute little characters on it, or the paper masks, they are not effective with preventing COVID. Okay, truly what is effective in preventing the spread of COVID are N95 masks. And in order to use those properly, you need to be fit tested. So my question is, are you gonna have that done for our children? I hope not. I don't think feasibly it's very cost effective and that you guys would vote to have us all have our children be fit tested with clean masks daily. Okay, so that's one point. I want you guys really to kind of take into consideration what one of the other women mentioned about the 20 days of quarantine. We didn't have that last year. We didn't have 20 days. I mean, I didn't think of it as a percentage, but that's 10% of the school year. That's crazy. Yes.
That's my understanding.
Oh, that was, okay. Because I mean.
There is a bullet in there that talks about the 20 days, and looking at it now, I had written that before the BHS guidance came out. And really what it should say is we're going to follow page 9 and the algorithm on DHHS. So if you're able to get to the DHHS guidance, they have the sheet out there that's an algorithm.
I have that.
And the nurses explained it to me, and it talks about if you are a close household contact, you have to self-isolate for a certain amount of days and then test out.
Except there's rapid testing now.
Right, and so so that, I'm gonna propose that we take that,
Okay,
that
okay,
bullet
thank you.
out of the plan.
Okay.
And-
Yeah.
And someone asked a question about accepting the self-test, and we've talked to the nurses, and we will have to have some sort of documentation from that self-test. You can't just say, I did a self-test and it was fine. But I believe, where's Mark's? Did the nurses say they would accept the self-test? My memory is right.
I've been looking for some confirmation.
Right, we want some sort of documentation, but we weren't against accepting the self-test. So that bullet will probably come out, because
Okay.
we're gonna.
So thank you. And just with looking at, using masks that are not N95 masks, it's really like my son, who he gets a scratch on his finger and he wants a Band-Aid because it makes him feel better. The masks, as we're wearing them, or the people that are wearing them, it's really like a Band-Aid. It's making us feel better or them feel better about protecting themselves. And you know what? I'm not wearing a mask. My children are not wearing masks. I'm a rule follower. If you make it mandatory, I'm gonna have my kids wear the masks, of course. I'm not here to start trouble. But it's really just putting a Band-Aid on the situation to make people feel better, okay? I agree with some of the statements about media hyping things up and really instituting fear in all of us. That's true. So really, my question is, and my emphasis wants to be, give us a choice. Give parents and families a choice on what we want our children to do, mask or no mask, let us choose. Same thing, vaccination or no vaccination, let us choose. And that's all I have to say.
Board, you ready? Teresa Oliveria, please unmute and speak.
Hi, thank you for letting us speak today, and thank you for the very thoughtful research that you have done to try and help to make this decision. I'm Teresa Oliveira. I live in Heidi Lane. I'm also a local pediatrician. I'd just like to make a comment about how masks work. The Academy of Pediatrics actually came out with a statement that showed that masks are actually has dramatically decreased respiratory illness throughout the United States. And I can tell you personally that I have not seen this ever in 20 years. I have decreased the amount of sick visits that I need during the pandemic to almost zero because the kids are just wearing masks and not getting sick. Since they started circulating again and have stopped wearing masks, we are now needing to have more sick visits because we're now seeing colds and strep throat and things like that. We have the luxury in New Hampshire that we have a delay in seeing the pandemic. And we've seen this not only in the United States, but in New Hampshire itself. So it comes from the south and comes up. I am very concerned of what my emergency room colleagues are seeing in the south. They're seeing more admissions to the ICU for kids and more kids getting admitted with the Delta variant. Wearing a mask is not to protect your child, it's to protect other children and other community members who may be susceptible to disease. I agree, I hate this. I don't like the invasion of my personal freedom. However, I have to think of others. The Delta variant is a concern of mine, and I hope that I'm sure the board is going to be looking at that because using the CDC as guidelines. I know they're looking at that very carefully. I do have some concerns about if we do have a plan where we're going to quarantine in the future, that the teachers be ready to do some online learning, because I do have concerns about my patients who have learning disabilities or auditory processing issues where they require more in-person learning. So I hope that's in the plan as well. But I just wanted to make that comment that personally I've seen dramatic decrease in respiratory illnesses. And the purpose for masks are not to protect the individual, but to protect others around you. And I tell my patients that every day, that I'm wearing this mask to protect you. Since I'm vaccinated, I really don't have concerns when I'm in the community. Thank you very much.
I don't have any more on.
Yeah, there's
Hey,
no
go ahead.
Jonathan Banks.
John Banks. Go ahead and unmute and go.
Hi there. So I'm assuming you'll probably other people have maybe come to the same conclusion that perhaps most people who would be commenting and advocating for masks and additional layers of protection weren't super comfortable coming out in person. I wasn't sure quite how clear it was finding the link for the meeting, finding this link for the meeting versus the YouTube link. I think that the more layers of protection that we can provide our kids, the better. That includes vaccines, that includes cohorting, that includes sanitizing, and it includes masks. And I don't see the masks as quite as a big invasion of my privacy or other people's privacy as it sounds like some of my neighbors do. But I don't know. I work with kids a lot, and in my experience, they are quite a bit more resilient than us adults give them credit for. I was this last year really surprised with how well the kids I worked with handled masks, handled distancing, handled all the extra stuff that was getting thrown at them this year, and for the most part, they did great. Certainly some of the concerns in terms of education and quality were definitely not quite the same. It looked a little bit different, but I was very impressed with, the kids, mostly. The kids did great. And also just one more quick comment that I wanted to make that's kind of related and kind of not is, I heard a lot of the comments were from families who were saying how pre-COVID their kids were doing great and they were loving it and school was amazing. And I just thought maybe we should highlight that, because I'm hearing a lot of people saying how wonderful the education was, and this last year was so tough because we took a hit and it was tricky and our kids didn't quite have the same experience. But juxtapose that with what they were just saying, how the staff at our schools, you guys are killing it. We have the administration, the teachers, the support staff, everyone, you're doing a great job. That's what I was hearing. If we listen to the comments that were about what we were getting for our education here pre-COVID. So thanks for that. You guys are doing great. Thanks so much.
Back to the mic.
But you did just have somebody come on the remote.
Oh, David, you're good to unmute and talk.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I support the NAA's position. I'm not a teacher, I'm an epidemiologist in a pandemic, so it's been a busy couple of years, as you can imagine, doctorally trained. And, masks are one layer. There are different grades of masks, but it's not a dichotomy. It's not either they are or they are not. It's sort of how effective are they? And so cloth masks do have some effectiveness, as Dr. Oliveira shared with us. That's good information. I think that the plan, to my eyes, looks good. And wearing masks in school for kids is for others. And it's not only to protect other kids, it's also to protect the adults in their homes and other adults that they might come in contact with. And one other point I wanted to make, and I'm forgetting what it is. So keeping kids in school, wearing a mask for others. Yes, and so, yeah, when you're vaccinated, right, when you're immunized, you can, you're gonna have a lot of protection and you're very unlikely to get severe disease or die. Great. But what is still happening sometimes, and still rare, but when we're talking about such big numbers as the entire planet, those small percentages matter, right? They do. And so we're talking about a whole community. A small percentage is not something to just dismiss offhand. So long COVID is where I'm going with this. And that is happening even to those who are vaccinated and then get a breakthrough infection. That can happen. And you don't want that either, right? So it's not just, oh, you're going to be fine, you'll be asymptomatic. There is that potential. It's not super common, but there is that potential. And I just think that that's not talked about a lot right now in the media. In some circles, it's a little more prevalent. So, just 2 cents, my kids are going to be wearing masks, and I am so glad to have them back in person. They did well remotely, but the teachers do their best work in person usually, and so do the kids. Thanks.
Hi, Alex Cadwell, I'm 16 Hockey Point Drive. Just a couple comments. One, there's good data, as was previously mentioned, that teachers had lower rates of COVID than the general population. So the teacher risk calculation is really not, and we're overblowing it. As a really good study, Iceland, they did through their population far more detailed studies than anywhere else. They actually were able to genetically sequence the virus as it went from person to person, and they could tell who it went from. In the entire country of Iceland, there was not a single case of spread from a child to a teacher. That doesn't mean it can't happen, it has happened, but it's exceedingly rare, that's frankly. About the masks, Brown University kept a very good database looking at all the comparing communities that did have mask mandates versus those that didn't. And actually, in areas of high transmission, there was a trend towards increased transmission in cases, generally between staff, not from teacher to student, not from student to teacher. There was an increase in cases where masks were mandated. So you can do a study, you can say, gee, in the lab, this looks good, but in the real world, the masks have not had an appreciable effect. It's an airborne virus. We're using cloth masks. Mike Loscombe, who is the former White House coronavirus advisor under the current administration, made a comment both before and after being in his in that position. That firstly, he said wearing a cloth mask is like wearing a cloth mask was like closing 3 of the 4 screen doors in your submarine. Not effective. And then he most recently basically said that cloth masks are essentially useless. And he's I believe he's the head of infectious disease at the University of Minnesota. And he's not doing his advisory role at the White House. So I think it's a feel-good measure and not something that is actually doing anything. And there is harm. That's my 2 cents.
Next. How's it going? I'm Robert from Old Hopkinton Road. Not an epidemiologist, I'm friend to me, so I don't have a lot of facts here, but I've been going through it with you guys, past year, just so you guys have. I think you guys did a great job last year, as much as you can. We had a situation that was unprecedented, right? We didn't even know what we were facing, and so I think the measures that were taken were probably appropriate. We're in a very different situation now. It's a year later, we have a vaccine and 3 vaccines. I think we're looking at a very different situation than we were last year, and I think that it would behoove us to act appropriately. I spent a lot of time trying to put myself in your shoes of what this kind of decision is like, and from my perspective, it kind of arrives at 2 different things, right? This is a tough decision because on one hand, you have a safe decision to make, which is make these kids mask up. God forbid something happens, it's going to come back on you guys, right? And you can come back and say, we did everything we could do. All the kids with masks, with every measure possible to stop this from happening. It's a safe decision. On the other hand, you have the right decision, which is to operate still carefully, but to remove these kind of almost needless measures at this point, like masks. And we're at a point now where if you need to be protected, if you're vulnerable, you can go out and get a vaccine. I got a vaccine. It's great. Right in here. You got the old genetic modification on. But you can go protect yourself now, right? And it's crazy that the information that's out there is all over the place, but it seems to fall on 2 different extremes, right? We have a lot of people that are saying, oh man, these masks are useless and you can't use them. We're looking to say, you got a mask, everybody's got a mask, my dog wears a mask. Well, you've got these 2 things that, some people have spent some time thinking about this, right? Socrates, Hegel, right? The Hegelian triad, Socratic continuum. You have a thesis, you have an antithesis. The right decision, the truth, it doesn't lie on the extremes. It lies in the middle, right? Making every single kid come to school masked up, that is on the extreme. So take that into consideration in your position. One more thing I want to share with you, just kind of going into this is not, I've been dealing with this for a year. I've been dealing with it for 3 years. 3 years ago, my son Caleb was born. He spent 5 months in a hospital down in Hartford, Connecticut, where he passed away and I decided to move home. And we wrestled endlessly with doctors and medical professional opinions and experts from Chicago and Russia and all over the world. And one thing I learned there's a lot of things I learned going through that experience. One thing is that sometimes these doctors, they're not smart as they think they are. They look at it from one angle, which is that medical angle. And that's why we're not sitting in front of a panel of doctors right now. Yeah, I'm assuming you guys are all doctors. One of you is. I know, for sure.
And not real.
Few of you are. Yeah. Like Dr. Dre, right? Are you a rapper by any chance? But that's why we have you guys up here to make this decision, because you're looking at it from all angles. And And that was the same kind of thing that I was forced in looking at with my son. And actually, one of the things that we wrestled with was masking. My son Wyatt, who was 4 at the time, we had to make a decision on whether or not we could get him into the NICU, which is a highly controlled environment, especially during flu season at the time, to see to meet his brother. And that was a constant wrestling with administrative staff at the NICU, with administrative staff at the hospital, doctors, all sorts of stuff on what do we do here, you know. And I fought then against having him wear a mask, right? Because of the risks of him not wearing a mask and then possibly having to deal with some flu, it kind of overrode him being able to see his brother before he died. So that's kind of an extreme example, but you know, I look at things like the experience that I had. I look at images on the TV of little girls in Afghanistan walking into school the day after the Taliban took over their country, and they're threatening their ability to be able to do that, but walking down to school that day. I look at that. It's the right thing. It's the right thing. It's the brave thing to do. And I hope that you guys, I know it's not in your best interest to make the decision to do that. The best interest for you. You know, if I was in your shoes, I'd want to protect myself. But I hope that you do the brave thing, because our kids need you. That's all.
I wish you went after me, that was much better said. Sorry, I'm here again. I just wish to reject the assertion that masks were and are the reason that we didn't have transmission in schools. We did a lot of other stuff. There was a lot of screaming. People weren't sending their kids to school when they were sick. Don't send your kids to school sick. That's the answer.
After, so the last call for comments from the Google Meet. Good? Yeah. Is there anyone who'd like to talk? If you just want to raise your hand or unmute yourself, we'll hear you.
Wow.
Bruce Marshall has his hand up on the mic. I thought you might, Bruce, so just go ahead and unmute yourself, Bruce, and we'll be able to hear you.
Sorry, Dean, I cut off the end of it. Ask Bruce to speak again.
Sorry, Bruce. Roy cut you off. It wasn't me. Don't blame me. Bruce, try to unmute yourself, and we'll see if we can hear you.
He's not unmuting himself. No, you don't. Oh, he's getting one twice now. Here we go.
Let's see if we can get one. There we go. Yeah, Bruce, unmute yourself if you can, and we'll listen to you.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, I want to thank you for giving everybody the opportunity to speak to you and all the hard work you guys have done over the last year and a half. But I, like a lot of the people speaking tonight, want to decide what's the best way to protect my child. Although I've had 4 kids to go through the entire system, I've always been proud of both schools. But as you know, Dean, I've had some ups and downs. I mean, it took the school a better part of a year to get a child in school to stop beating on my daughter when she was in 1st grade. And it didn't get resolved till me as the parent stepped in to make sure the proper things were done. And I appreciate the school for working with us to get that resolved. But when it comes to protecting the health of my 2 kids, one going into 2nd grade, one going into 4th grade, I want them to be able to go into school, and we'll decide whether or not they need to wear a mask. If I have somebody in my house, I have an elderly mother, I have in-laws living with me. If they become high risk, then I will not ask the rest of the town to try to protect my in-laws or my mother from any potential virus, whether it be COVID-19 or something else. I'll take the necessary steps with the kids, my family members they come into contact with. And I think that that's only fair. I think Bo's always been a town that's worked together, but I think we're starting to overreach when we're gonna take away parents' right to decide what's best for their child when they attend school. I do commend you for essentially doing away with the remote learning, because for our kids, it was not a good experience. You know, we spent a lot of time doing extra work with them, but we had a lot of problems on the school side of that. And we felt the quality that we've become accustomed to in both the last 30 years just wasn't there. So we appreciate that. And I'd only ask, and my wife would also ask, she's sitting here with me, that when you make this decision, don't try to become our parent, don't try to become our healthcare provider. Let us make those decisions for our own families and our own children. And thank you all, and I commend you for the effort you guys have all put forward over the last year and a half. Thank you very much.
I think we have one more at the mic, and then I think we'll run further.
Hi, my name is Danielle Bushies. My husband's Tom Bushies. We live on 4 McNichol Lane. I'm a local OBGYN and my husband is a local pediatrician. And first I'd like to say thank you to the school board for all the work you've all done last year and this year and making really mindful decisions and hearing what we all have to say. So just one little bit, it's been hard, you know, as a medical professional, there's data all over the place, but it's hard not to hear that COVID isn't as serious as I think it is. The mortality from COVID is not the same as influenza. And so my husband and I believe that masks work, and obviously we're all mostly in agreement about the vaccine working. We're in agreement, my husband and I, that following our local guidelines, that if it's in substantial spread, that masks should be universal. I know it takes away the choice, and that's hard, but again, like Dr. Oliver said, we wear the mask to protect each other and decrease the community spread and keep each other safe. So just wanted to give my opinion there. Thanks for all your hard work and listening to all of us tonight.
All right.
One more? I'll keep it quick because it's past my bedtime.
Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I just have a couple of comments on the masks and COVID. The COVID-19 virus is so small, so tiny, and the plastic, fabric, and cloth masks that our kids wear don't provide the protection that we believe they do, or led to believe they do. It's really like throwing sand through a chain link fence. The masks are not effective, so because they're not effective, I don't think we should force them on the kids. I think it really should be a choice. Some of the concerns that I have as a registered nurse, respiratory risks from wearing the mask, skin conditions, breathing plastic nanoparticles from these disposable masks. This is kind of funny, but potential to permanently deform the ears of kids. I mean, day in and day out, they're tugging on their ears. Decreased oxygenation for these long days at school. In reality, at school, young children, I have a 7-year-old, they don't wear masks properly or hygienically throughout the day. So this does create a condition for some of these risk factors. So masks falling on the ground, putting them back on, taking them off, having a break, setting them down in the bathroom, constantly touching their face, and just the spread of germs to the mask, and then they have the mask on their face throughout the day, and they're forced to breathe in that contamination all day. And you might send your kid to school with extra masks, but more than likely they're coming home with the same mask on. I'd love to see masks removed from society altogether, but I see that everybody has different opinions, and everybody should do what's best for themselves. And I think that the best decision as a school board would be a compromise because it is such a divided issue and people are really passionate on both sides. So the compromise would be to allow choice. You know, let us mask the kids or let us not mask the kids, and everybody could feel confident in their decisions, and we can see how the school year goes, and you can always make changes. Thank you very much.
I wasn't sure.
Comment? Okay.
I just don't want to end on that note, if that's okay. Masks are most effective when everyone is wearing them. If you make masks optional, no one will be safe. Because we know that masks are not 100% effective at reducing all the risks. But when everybody is masked, you are lowering the risk for everyone. Optional masking does not do anything to protect our children. And I know it's really important that we have in-person learning. And that's what we all want. And if we want that, as much as we say we do, we have to provide the protection our children need to stay consistently in school. It's very important. We all recognize that. And the most disruptive thing is not the mask wearing. It is the fluctuation between in-person and remote, and having to make those on-the-spot changes to your life. And it's very hard for someone who's working a normal job 5 days a week to drop what they're doing to switch to having their child home in remote learning. If they can depend on consistent in-person learning, it makes it better for all families. It makes it better for children as well. So I really hope that we can make this school year the least disruptive and the most in-person learning, best environment for our children, so they can see their teachers every day, so they can get the great education that Bo provides for our children day in and day out. And we know remote learning is hard, but if we really want to avoid it, we need to be taking the steps necessary to protect our children. So please, please require masks universally to protect all of our children and keep them in school for the entire school year. I really hope that you will make that decision. Thank you.
Okay. Now public comment has ended. So now we will discuss this. I think the best way to do it is we can just start, just go down the table and say what everybody feels. Is everybody comfortable with that?
Yes.
Start, Bryce.
Again, it's a weird forum because it's
Yeah, we're
going to be
usually
talk to
around
you
like
guys. Anyway, I guess frame of reference. There are 5 in my family. I have a freshman in college, and a junior in high school, and an 8th grader. All 5 of us are vaccinated. I wore a mask everywhere I was inside until I got vaccinated, and I stopped wearing a mask unless someone required me to. Since if anyone in here asked me to wear a mask, I would put one on, even though I don't think I need one because I'm vaccinated, but I would do it out of respect for others. I never wear them now. I traveled all over the Eastern Seaboard this past summer. I've been to Virginia driving, Maryland, I went to Wisconsin. And basically none of the 5 of us wore a mask for the most part. Because I believe the vaccine that I took is sufficient to deal with my situation and my family. My son is a freshman in college. He's at a private school in Wisconsin. They're requiring vaccines for all kids, so that's his situation. I just give you a frame of reference because we all have our own personal takes, and that's my experience. I've done what I feel like is a fair amount of research. You can never do enough because, as somebody said, there's studies in every direction. Everything's all over the map on this. But just looking at schools in New Hampshire right now, schools that are requiring masks that I came across at all K through 12, Concord, Nashua, Hopkinton, Portsmouth, Henniker. Schools that are saying optional K through 12, Bedford, Merrimack Valley, Ware, Exeter, Rochester, Londonderry. And then there's a couple that are sort of in between. So where I come back to on this is why the masks in the first place. And I go back a year ago, and the fear was that the kids were going to bring this home and get particularly elderly folks at home COVID, and the mortality rate with the older folks was significantly higher than the kids. That's my recollection, is how we came to really focus on the masks in the first place. It was, and a number of people have said this and others have disagreed with this. In my experience, the masks do work. I mean, not a single person in my family was sick with a cold or anything else this winter. In my experience, it seemed like the flu and everything was way down. And I do attribute that to masks. Again, I'm not a doctor, but it strikes me that they do work. What's weird about COVID is as I understand it, the mask, if I have COVID and I'm wearing the mask, it keeps me from giving it to you. And that's what's unusual, I find, with this disease. And so that's the difficulty when people say, I want to make a choice for my kids. The choice for you and your family is affecting other people. And that's what's so, I think, unique and challenging with the disease that we have. So what do we do now? We've got kids 12 and older that have had the opportunity to be vaccinated. I did some research, and from what I could tell, again, I'm sure there's others that could contradict this, the peak of COVID this past year was in January, and kids that ended up being hospitalized across the country were 0.002%. I view that as a very, very, very low percentage of kids that were getting very sick, hospitalized. Also, the breakthrough cases, vaccine folks that have been vaccinated that end up with COVID, from the best I can tell, is less than 1%, which could be me. I could get it from being at this event. I guess that's a risk I'm willing to take by being here. So to me, it's almost not so much about COVID as it's about risk assessment. And for me, it comes down to, there's a cost benefit with masks. There's no question it was tougher for kids to learn. There were lots of downsides with wearing masks. There's no question about that. But at the same time, I do feel that they've been very effective in keeping COVID away. And so there's a balance there between kids using masks and interrupting the ability to get the best education that they can. And there is a balance that we need to decide, I think, as to where that lies. And for me, let's start with the high school. I would not require masks at the high school. I think everyone at the high school is older than 12. They have the option to be vaccinated. All the teachers have the option to be vaccinated. And to me, that is where I would stand on the high school. The other schools, I think, are a little trickier, and the reason being the middle school, very tricky, right? Because half the school is under 12. But the elementary school, none of those kids are vaccinated. And so let's say there was a cluster and a lot of these kids get the cold and the flu and that sort of thing. There is a chance that one could be hospitalized. It's extremely unlikely. But where I land with that's the school, and I really, this is really a question for the board, is that, and maybe the administrators, but sometimes in the winters, we'll get, let's say it's 2017, it's a February day, and we'll get a report that 20% of the low elementary was out of school because of the cold or flu. Well, if this is as contagious as I understand it to be, those kids at BES are going to be out of school because if it's really going to run rampant through there, you're going to shut down the schools anyway, and you're going to be in a remote situation. And so if they're not going to be, if it's going to threaten the ability to have in-school learning, then I think we have to consider whether it should be required at the elementary school. Again, maybe Eric or somebody can talk more about that. I don't know the stats. Yeah.
I just have a question about when you're.
Yep.
Yeah, sorry. Is this good? Okay. Everybody keeps saying mask optional, and I just keep picturing, because I was a teacher at one point, dealing with young kids in the mask optional environment. How does the school see that working? Is there anybody here that could answer how that would work if, like, 20, you have a class of 20 and 5 kids were wearing masks, and their parents really want them to have those masks on, but the 15 other are not wearing them? I think that's something that needs to kind of be talked about, because I know there's
variant size.
I kind of adjust that my opening. I wouldn't say it's mass optional, I would say it's mass recommended. And I just think that's a better way to say optional recommended. The difficulty will come is if we have schools where we say mass or either optional or recommended, whichever verbiage you want. We're not enforcing it. Because then you're putting, I have to keep a list of kids whose parents want them to be masked, kids who want them to be optional. We're not enforcing it. We will support anyone in school who wants to wear the mask. But I gave the dress code example. I'm not going to enforce that. And I think what will happen is there will be a lot of kids who come to school and I did it myself when masks were first coming up. I go into an environment and I look around and it's like, am I the only one with a mask on? Well, I might take it off. Or if everyone else is masked up, I might keep it on. If we say masks are required, then we will enforce it. And I think that is what you have to say. If you say that masks are required, our administrators will enforce. If you say masks are optional, we will support anyone who wants to wear a mask. And we will do that anyway. I mean, I'm not making fun of anyone who wore a mask here tonight. I totally support them. We will have masks at school and we will do that sort of thing. But you're asking your schools to do something pretty phenomenal if you're saying we need to know what everyone's preference was and enforce either you want your child to have a mask or not. So does that answer your question, Nicole?
Yeah.
I'll pass the mic. I have two last little comments here, I guess, which is, I think I do prefer the Dunbarton Boat data, the local data, as opposed to the broader community. I think if to the extent we're going to be relying on data for making any mass changes. And the last is that we're going to have a pretty idea what happens in schools that have optional masks because we have so many schools in the state that are doing that. So within a couple of weeks, I'm sure we're going to know whether the masks make a difference or not. And I really strongly think we need to revisit this subject at all three schools, like in 3 weeks, because maybe all three need a mask after that, or maybe all three are like, why do we think we need a mask? So my 2 cents.
Thank you. This is probably, as we have gone into our second year, I think, dealing with all of this, these are the real tricky emotional times for all of us. There's no, in my opinion, right or wrong answer. It's really hard to make these decisions, and I think when all of us ran for school board, this was not what we were thinking we were going to be doing. These were not decisions because we know how much they're impacting people's lives. It's hard because as we read through all of the emails that we received, I know what I would like to do personally, but I'm an elected official, so I need to look at what other people want. That's why I'm sitting here, not just to have my voice, but to have the town's voice. So I was like, great, I'm gonna look at what people are emailing. That way I can be able to vote according to what the community wants. The community is pretty much split. The data, people can give me data saying no masks, people can give me data saying masks. So at the end of the day, it's really hard to decide. The one part that I just really hope moving forward, whatever decision is made this evening, our students, our children are going to be looking to us to be the role models. If you don't like the decision, when you walk through the door this evening in front of your children, you put a smile on your face and you say, this is what's going to happen. We're going to make the most of it because we're all here to advocate for our kids and we need to role model for them the appropriate response, even if we don't like the response that we get this evening. So I just hope moving forward, we can all take that attitude because the divide that we are seeing is really starting to impact a lot of areas of our lives. That being said, I kind of echo what Bryce was saying, that I kind of look at the high school a little different because there is a vaccine available for that age group. And then from there on out, it does get a little trickier to try to tease out what the appropriate answer is. I do think we need to look more at our community, Bow and Dunbarton, when we make decisions as to what we should be doing and if we are going to move in our color matrix. And I do think it's something that needs to be revisited every couple of weeks because as we have seen, this changes constantly. And I would hate to make a decision today for the whole school year. So I think it's just something we have to continuously check the pulse on and make sure that we are constantly reevaluating and making the best decision for our children.
My turn. Can you guys hear me? So the way I see this is, how many layers of defense do we have against this thing? That's going to stick around for a while. And much like Bryce and Jen, I think the high school is pretty easy. It's pretty straightforward. There's vaccines available. That's your best line of defense. I also think that the elementary school is fairly straightforward because there just is no vaccine available for any of the students. And I just cannot live with the thought that we would spread COVID in elementary school. That's just, to me, an unbearable thought. Knowing that I can give defense mechanisms to those kids, meaning masks. So I'm strongly in favor of universal masking in the elementary school. It becomes very tricky in the middle school because, like you said, half of the population is over 12, and half the population is under 12, so we would have to kind of figure out what we do there. I'm also in favor of, as vaccines become available for younger ages, we should definitely revisit this plan and become less restrictive, because then you have more defenses available. Yeah, that would be my thought.
Hi, Eric Schulman from the Bow School Board. I may have a different viewpoint. I'm a pediatrician, so I come from this medical background and how it may affect my views. I'm vaccinated. I'm hoping everyone who can get vaccinated will get vaccinated. Vaccines are very effective. I think this Delta surge that's upon us is important to keep in mind when we're making our decisions. I think it's important that we're able to change how we're viewing and making these decisions as time goes by. Right now, looking at the map of new cases of COVID in our county, they're rising dramatically, and looking at places south of here in particular, their ICUs, their intensive care units are full and overflowing with patients they can't find places for from COVID. COVID is a real illness. Masks do help prevent the spread of this illness. I'm mostly concerned about those 12-year-olds who can't be vaccinated. If we have a 12-year-old and above who can receive a vaccine, that is that family's choice to vaccinate or not vaccinate. But for those who are in the younger half of the middle school and all of those in the elementary school, they don't have an option. They can't be vaccinated. They can't be protected by the vaccine. And so if we send other children in with maybe minor symptoms or no symptoms yet, but they have the COVID virus and they're sharing it with some other child who isn't vaccinated, we're putting that child at risk. Most children who catch this illness will have a minor illness. It won't be a big deal, but some have a bad illness. More and more children are being hospitalized with this virus. It appears that the Delta variant affects the younger children more so than the previous variants. So we don't know what we're up against because it's a new variant. The data that we look at currently, if you look at any data, doesn't reflect the Delta variant yet. So it's an unknown, and we're stuck making a decision as a group here about what to do with this surge that's coming, and hopefully we'll be past this fairly quickly, but we don't know how it's going to affect our children. And I don't think any of us are trying to make decisions to protect ourselves, as was mentioned by a commenter. We're trying to make the best decisions to protect the children who attend our schools. And at the same time, keeping in mind, masks take away from interpersonal interactions, learning, and we understand that. But in putting it all together, it is a dangerous virus that needs to be looked at as such. The American Academy of Pediatrics, who looks out for our children, both medically and psychosocially, as well as the Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, both have come up strongly and said they recommend masks for all ages in all schools. So while we might support choosing which age groups in which schools we do or do not vaccinate, in doing so, we'd be going against some big experts. The Centers for Disease Control and the American Academy of Pediatrics recommend that they all be masked, that everybody in the school system, the children and the adults, wear masks. And I don't pretend that I know more than they do. So it's important to realize those are the recommendations. On balance, we need to make these decisions. I think it's important that we're ready to swing back and change our decisions, what vary them as needed. I think we're up against a surge that's coming that'll probably be relatively short-lived if it's like other variants that come and they go. I think it's important, as has been already mentioned, that we revisit our decisions soon and frequently. I think that most likely, if we are in masks when we start, for some or all, most likely it won't be needed for all that long, but we should make those decisions based on fact. I personally would be in favor of at least having masks for those who are 12 and under, which means basically the sixth grade and under. And as far as that goes, if you're not masking the older half of the middle school, that means that you are exposing the younger half of the middle school from the older kids. So I guess I'm saying I would at least recommend having the elementary and middle schools have masks. I believe in the Centers for Disease Control and the American Academy of Pediatrics, and for that reason, I recommend all the schools have masks. But if we're trying to be compromising, I think high school would make sense not to have masks. They have the ability to be vaccinated. I think the younger kids in the middle school and the elementary schools should have masks. Yeah, that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, Jeff Moody, Dunbarton School Board. So just as a preface, I'm not a registered Democrat, I'm not a registered Republican, I'm more of a registered realist. And another thing, my wife is a cancer survivor, and the decisions that we've talked about over a number of days and a lot of sleepless nights that I've had are fully supported within our family. So we talked a lot about what we think we know and the data that we have, and we talked a lot about quantitative data related to physical health and those sorts of things. But what we haven't talked about as much is the mental and emotional health of our kids. And it's really important. It's an important subject to me. We fully realize, and I'm going to read this because I'm not a good public speaker, but I did write some notes. When we, in this period, when we fully realize how much we don't know about how to approach preventative measures in our schools and community, I strongly feel that our children's mental and emotional health needs to be given more consideration than it's currently getting. This might be because it's significantly easier to measure the number of COVID cases in the short term, which is not the case for long-term effects on our children from wearing masks and other related control measures during this critical period of their growth, in particular with elementary school kids. It's going to take a lot of years before we can adequately research how the pandemic has negatively impacted generations' mental, emotional, and social development. But I would like to ask the board to consider this in their vote. Right now, active cases in our community are very low, and I would hope that we could consider starting off the school year in a masks recommended stance while remaining flexible as the situation changes in the local area. I don't want us to make green the new normal. It's going to be a really hard precedent to change. And particularly when the rest of the state hasn't followed suit yet. Students can take their masks off after school and go do whatever it is that they want, and we can all do everything else that we want without having to wear a mask. So we should consider this. The other thing that I want to point out is that as a school system, our remit is to educate. If the community is unable to take care of business of vaccinations or anything like that, I don't believe that we should act as agents of control in our schools. Staff and teachers continually monitoring and managing distancing, masks, and other measures takes away significantly from the goal of educating. In elementary school particularly, the student having a bad year can set them back significantly. I've spoken with many parents in our school district who feel that their student had a very bad year last year, much of it coming from the constraints placed upon them in the classroom. We're in a position to start our year off related to active cases with the masks recommended policy that gets us back to educating. We can always remain flexible and consider other color levels should we need to, but no child in our school should have to endure 2 bad years. How far behind the eight ball do our kids that are having problems in their learning need to be before we realize that the damage that we're causing? I think it's a big problem. So we should consider that. And the last thing is that we talk a lot about the fact that kids in the elementary school have not had the chance to be vaccinated yet. I hope we're not under the assumption that there's going to be a higher percentage of kids in our elementary schools that are vaccinated than the general population. So that brings up the question of a year down the line, when we still have variants and we only have a portion of our kids in elementary schools vaccinated, are we going to still require masks of everybody universally to protect those kids? When does it become a family's decision about when that's going to be? I have a child in fourth grade, or fifth grade. I don't want to make this about me and my child, but I have friends that have kids in first and second grade. They know nothing else but masks, and implementing a precedent where we're taking care of all of the kids who haven't vaccinated by making everyone wear a mask. I can't imagine what that would be like as an experience for a kid to go through their entire elementary school period. That's what I say.
I did. He's a nice guy.
Well, so that's a tough one to follow with this crowd, but there are a bunch of people who are not here who have a very different view, and
But they're not here.
But they emailed us.
but they did email us, and we have to consider everybody's. I agree with what Jennifer said before. This is very difficult being on the school board. If I was just thinking about my children, sure, it'd be very easy to think about, but I'm not just thinking about the parents here, I'm not just thinking about the kids, I'm thinking about the teachers, I'm thinking about everybody in the community. And like Martin, I know this is not popular, but I'd rather start off with more protection, and when it goes really well, take layers away, see where we're at in a few weeks. I like the idea that we have the ability to get together and discuss options. Again, it doesn't have to be masks for the rest of their life. I have a kindergartner, second grader, and third grader. So they only know masks. It's not that big of a deal to them. They don't love school. They love school. It depends on the day. But we don't make the masks that big of a deal. It's not that big of a deal to them. They walk in, they wear them, they come home. I have to remind them to take them off majority of the time. I know all kids are different, but that's just from this perspective. I am listening to what everybody is saying, but like the rest of you, I guess, we all have our own perspectives, but I suppose if I had to throw it out there, I'd rather start off cautiously.
I'm Jeff Trexler, Dunbarton Board. I agree with Nicole. I've been doing a lot of research on this, reading a lot of information. If masks are optional, that essentially means we're in the blue level. We're pre-pandemic. We're not in the blue level. The data I'm seeing is we still have COVID that is increasing in our communities, in our state. I would be very worried about the well-being of our kids in this confined space of our schools with the current community levels of COVID and having masks optional. I think we're in the green level. I support the plan that's been presented as the green level. And I agree, let's take another look as we move into the school year. Let's see how things progress. Can we peel back some of those layers? Let's wait and find out. I don't think we have enough information today for me to say that we're in the blue level, we're kind of pre-pandemic and masks aren't required. And another point is we really got to keep these kids in school. My wife was a school teacher, just retired this past year, and I know that during COVID, trying to deliver her program remotely, kids got only a small fraction of what the program was that kids get in school. We got to keep them in school if they're going to get the kind of education we want them to get. And at this point, to me, wearing masks is the best way to keep them in school, and let's see how it goes.
I guess I get to be the headlining act. You guys are all the opening band. Is this thing on? This this is a difficult subject. I appreciate all the views that were shown or shared tonight. I understand Jeff Moody's point very much. It's a tough thing. I can't imagine having a kid start kindergarten last year where there was, you had hybrid half the time or you remote, trying to tell a kid to sit in front of a computer screen and say, you're in school now, I think would be very difficult. And with that in mind, my main objective is to keep the kids in school. I think that's what is the most important thing. I think there's many ways we do that. Last year we did that because we cohorted, we screened, we had masks, and we had social distancing. And I know my kids don't want to cohort this year. They don't want to do that. And as someone pointed out previously, we had no super spreader events in school, but that's because we had a very high level of protection. Multiple levels. Now we have vaccination for higher kids or for older kids, and we also have, masks for everybody. I'm in the boat. I'm vaccinated. I had COVID. Personally, I feel no fear. I'm like Superman from a COVID standpoint. Not everybody's like that. Not everybody's going to be able to have that level of comfort, and we're dealing with a lot of different individuals. This is not necessarily a thing about, this is what's good for me, because we're looking at it from a community standpoint. And a lot of this guidance that we see from the CDC and from the American Association of Pediatrics is protecting the community, not just the individuals. And I think if we're thinking of that in that sense, masking makes a very easy solution to try and control transmission, which is what the whole point of it is. Because once somebody gets COVID, and they're not wearing a mask, they don't know it for a few days, they're shedding it, we have snooped up the variant, it travels very quickly, and then we have a cluster that breaks out, we have kids out of school, we're trying to avoid remote learning, we have teachers out of school, we're trying to avoid them teaching remotely. It becomes a cascading problem, and we're not quite sure where we're going to be, in 2 weeks, let alone in a couple of days. I mean, a month ago, I would have said, I'm all for no mask, I feel great, this is awesome, we're having fun of our lives, everyone's excited, we're all out having a good time. Now, in a month, the CDC changed their guidance, they're recommending masks inside. New Hampshire's own guidance, which is extremely wide open, is pointing us to a direction where they're recommending masks. And that's Dr. Chan, who works with Sununu, who we all know. To get them to try and recommend masks is almost impossible. So it's telling you something about where we might be in the level of this COVID spread. So thinking about that, in my mind, I can see it from different areas. I can see, 12 and under, those are the hardest kids to put in masks, but they're also ones that it would go through the quickest, and it's the way it would spread very quickly. Schools are a unique generator of spread because a lot of people come in from a lot of different areas into one place, they mingle, and they're gone, and they go back home, and it spreads quickly. I think in New Hampshire, we live in a little bit of a bubble. We're lucky. We don't have high-density population centers. We don't get these kind of situations where everything just expands at a rapid rate because we generally play outside. But that's, when you get into school, it's different. And I think that might change. And I think, I like this idea that we need to be flexible. We need to be able to move quickly. We need to be able to react. I like the idea of using what we have in our towns as a focus, but also, recognizing what's happening in the county and the state at large. I would think, in my mind, I have a third grader, he's excited to go to school, doesn't like masks, but, he's gonna wear a mask if we tell him to wear a mask. And I think, making masks optional gets back to the point. If they're not keeping a checklist of kids wearing masks, kids aren't gonna wear masks. And it kind of defeats the entire purpose of masks, so we're trying to protect the community. So I think I'm kind of in this boat of, 12 and under, I think it makes sense to start there. And Jeff and I had a conversation the other day, and he raised a good point about, if we start with masks, when do we ever get out of masks? And last year, we didn't want to start hybrid because we weren't sure if we'd ever get out of hybrid. And that was, I think, a very valid point, but I also think we're at this point where it's kind of an inflection. We're not sure where it's going to go, where it's going to end, and if we all of a sudden are out of school, I think to me that's much, much worse than having kids to wear masks. So I would, I appreciate all the board's opinions. I think they're all well-informed, and I think they're all well-intentioned. There's not, a single thing, that I think anybody here isn't trying to do for the benefit of our communities as a whole or students in general. But it's a difficult thing. In my mind, I think the suggestions that started out the other end of the table, BHS is kind of its own thing. as a Dunbarton board member, and I know Jeff shares this, and we're kind of entangling about this, we don't deal with Bow High School. That's the Bow Board. This is an SAU plan, but, you know, if the Bow Board decided something to do with Bow High School, we would tend to support what they want. But for us as Dunbarton Elementary, and having talked to our administration and union leadership, they want the kids in school, and they think if it's masks, if we can do it with masks, they'll wear masks, they don't care, they just want those kids there. They were tired last year of not being able to see their kids in class, and they also don't want a cohort. That was another thing, like having the kids on recess, not being able to play with each other in different classes, I think was hard for the kids. But that's, you know, just my son and my impression, but it's another thing I heard from the teacher. So railing on, I guess I would just say, yes, I think 12 and under, I think it's something where we have to start with that. And then we can assess if we don't have that blow up and, you know, everyone thinks it's coming, then we can change it. And I don't think there's anyone here who is opposed to changing it.
I just have one more point about that. When we talk about protecting the community, what are we saying here? Because the community has an opportunity to protect themselves if they want, right? So, what sense are you talking about? The people who don't have the option to be vaccinated, or?
Well, I mean, children can get sick from this, right? And they can take it home to people who, you know, can't take the vaccine. I think, you know, it's also it's not the one person, because this thing, it's a cascading effect. You know, a lot of people think, oh, well, I'm fine, I'll be fine. But it's not necessarily you, it's the 6 people down that you pass it on to that might get it. That's how it goes to the community. So I think, you know, back in the beginning, this was all about flattening the curve. We were trying to manage the infection rate, and that was part of our strategy. That's why we had such an intense amount of protection. We've obviously stepped back from that. We're trying to get in school. But if you're really trying to think about, you know, like, we've all heard the horror stories down in Alabama, you know, the redneck Riviera, things are just going crazy. We're not going to get that, but we're also going to be at, you know, at this thing where I think we have a chance to manage it, to see where we're at. I don't think that's a bad thing.
No, it's not a bad thing, but in Denmark, we talk about the numbers. In Denmark, we have between 0 and 4 active cases.
You're right, and that's in Dunbarton when school's out. When school is right, the schools, you know as well, Jeff, you're a biology major. You know, people come in from different areas, they go out. And if you don't know you have COVID, and you're not masking,
I think the difference that we have, the only difference I think is that I'm a proponent of masks recommended to start, and we've been extremely flexible as the situation changes, and you are of the opposite. Right?
I'm not necessarily of the opposite. I think we have room, but it's also something that, you know, we need to be responsive. Right now, you know, 0 to 4 in Dunbarton is where we're at. And that's, you know, that's one thing. Of course, Bow is just slightly higher. Of course, Bow's got a vaccination rate of 67%, and we're, you know, at 54. So there's, you know, we're not quite as protected as a group, but we're certainly not, you know, I think, and I'm not saying, like, there's no right answer. You know, I understand what you're saying.
If I could add to that, you don't put a mask on when you have high numbers. You put a mask on before you get high numbers. If you had 500 people in Dunbarton with illness, it's too late. You have to put the mask on now before it spreads. That's how it works. Regarding the timeline too, we're talking about if you don't want to wear masks forever. And hopefully, as we get past the Delta surge, which won't last long, hopefully, we can rethink things. But as far as those under 12 we're talking about that we're trying to protect, those of us who are talking about that, we're expecting a vaccine to probably be available by December, hopefully a little sooner, for those age groups. I'm going to feel a lot differently about this whole discussion, if I know that they can be vaccinated. Right now, it's just, we have this age group, a lot of our kids can't be vaccinated, so you can't protect them. I don't know how many of them have underlying medical illnesses that if they catch COVID, it's worse for them than your average kid. So you can send your average kid in who doesn't wear a mask, who just gets COVID and gets a sniffle, but he passes it on to someone else who just gets a sniffle, but he passes it on to someone else who has an underlying medical disorder and gets really sick from it. So most people don't get very sick from it, but I don't know which kid might get very sick from it. I just want to protect that one kid who might get really sick from it and always just put a mask on. And I should say always do. The mask, I hate masks. I try to avoid wearing masks, but I don't need to. I'm not wearing one right now. I've had the vaccine. But my child wears a vaccine when we go into a public place. And he's almost done with his vaccine series. So it's important for the young kids.
Let's bubble wrap all our kids.
It's not constructive. Why does he get away with calling somebody a redneck?
Time for public comment. It's the time.
You should be denouncing what he said on the end, calling people rednecks in Alabama. That's a bigoted statement.
No, it was I think it's a thing they call themselves on the beach down there. They call it the Gulf Shore down there.
You should be ashamed of yourself.
No, I'm not. I'm referring to something that they use.
It's just not a time to speak.
All right.
Not today in the public. That board is talking to themselves.
Okay. I will try to kind of summarize what everybody's said and put my own 2 cents in. So I have been researching this as much as I possibly can, like everybody else on the board. I have read every email from everybody. I have listened to every comment here today, trying to be so thoughtful about this decision, both my personal feelings, my professional feelings because I work in healthcare, and the community feelings because I'm an elected official and I have an obligation to represent everybody in our town. It's very challenging. I do personally feel that there are a lot of negative effects of masking young children. I think it definitely is not good for their socialization. I definitely think that it is hard for some students to learn, especially with, IEPs that have speech issues. I want the children unmasked because I think it's what's best for them. I also think that in-person learning has to be the priority. And regardless of if kids don't get very sick from COVID, right now, if you get COVID, you cannot step into our school building for 10 days. And if you are right next to somebody and you're there exposed, they have to be out for a long amount of time. And we're not requiring that, but we are requiring if you test positive that you have to be out for 10 days. And the Delta variant is extremely contagious. And so we could have whole classrooms out for 10 days. And even if a parent requires that their child wear a mask, if we don't require it, a child who has no symptoms could come into school with COVID without a mask on and spread it to a classroom, and all those parents' lives become disrupted. They're home with their child with no formal remote education for 10 days, and it's not what's best for our children. And I really, truly believe that, and I believe that is the sentiment of a lot of people in the community, is that our kids need to be in school. So I feel that until the vaccine can be offered to all school-age children, there should be required masks for those children that cannot get the vaccine. The high school is a different story. I really don't think 7th and 8th graders should have to wear a mask either because they've had the choice. I think it should be, at some point, it is a family decision. It's a decision made around your kitchen table. That's the way the state has told us it is going to be made. They are not mandating the vaccine. They are not telling us what to do with masks. The state has made it clear that they don't want to put their foot in this. So I don't think it's our job to put our foot in it at some point. But that some point has to be when every family has had the choice to protect their child with the best frontline defense right now that we have, which is the vaccination. The second best line of defense is a mask. It's not perfect, but it's the second best thing we have right now. And so until families have a choice to offer their children the vaccine or not, then I feel like we have to say for those kids 12 and under, they need to wear masks in school to keep all the kids in school in-person learning as much as possible. So that's sort of where I stand. I think some of us agree, some of us disagree on that. And I also think with regards to the matrix, I don't want to follow the BHS rubric at all. I don't think that looking at statewide spread is necessarily what's best for our community. Again, I do think, and I agree with Jeff on this, that going backwards is hard. So I would rather have a metric where we say we're gonna make a commitment to revisit this in a month. And we're gonna definitely make a commitment to revisit this when the vaccine's more widely available. Or vice versa. We're gonna relook at this if there's a huge spike in Bow and Dunbarton, or we start school and there's a pocket at the high school, maybe we need to have masks. So I think we need to look at school outbreaks within our own school district. I think we need to look at town numbers to some degree. I don't necessarily wanna follow that matrix that the DHHS put out. I don't necessarily think it's the best thing for our community. And I think a lot of this might change depending on what happens with Delta. It's either gonna explode here or it's not. I mean, I think that we don't know yet. The cases are rising every day. I mean, I feel like I said this in March when I said we should reopen the schools. The cases are going down. They're either gonna keep going down or they're not. There's so much we just don't know and we can't predict. But we can agree to revisit this frequently and decide, we can agree to change this, we can agree not to have, we can agree to have a flexible plan and not have a very strict, this is exactly what we're doing plan at this point. And that would be my choice, would be, you know, to start with vaccination K through, or masks K through 8, not at the high school, recommended at the high school, and revisit it. And I don't know what time frame, 3 or 4 weeks maybe. That's it. That's all I got. So.
Can I ask a quick question of the people that are supporting the elementary school? The mask, are you still thinking no mask at recess or outdoor time?
Yes.
And
No
open
mask
in the building?
outdoors.
Only, yes.
Okay.
No mask
I just,
outdoors.
I just wanted to clarify that.
Yep, no
When you're
masks
talking about
outdoors.
Required or not.
So, Board,
Is it okay if I ask a quick question? Just because there's been a lot of talk about K through 8 and not the high school. What about the families who have children in the high school and in the younger grades? If a child from the high school brings back the virus to their younger sibling who cannot get vaccinated and who won't be wearing a mask in their own home, how are you protecting those younger kids?
It's still an option for that high school student to wear a mask at the high school if they wanted to protect their sibling at home. We're not saying you can't wear a mask at the high school. It's still an option for any high school student to wear the mask if they chose to.
So if the mask protects people, then why can't we make that same choice at K through 8?
Because if you make that choice not to wear a mask and your child comes to school with COVID, they give it to a lot of other kids that haven't had the choice to be vaccinated and protect themselves.
My kid could get in a car accident tomorrow, and I'm choosing out of this every day, getting in a car.
Can you put a seatbelt on?
That's not contagious.
I put a seatbelt on my kid, but I could hit somebody else, I could hit 800 people. You guys are forcing our decisions, and you're not allowing us to make these decisions.
So this right now, COVID is a public health issue, so we're discussing what to do with masks and we're not taking public comment. We're not gonna take public comment, sorry.
we understand, we're trying to keep it fair and balanced, and we shouldn't be taking public comment.
And we heard and appreciate your views, even the views that I don't agree with, I hear, and I appreciate and I understand the importance of it. But now we need to have this discussion.
So, Board, I have a couple of suggestions for you as you begin to form your motion. If we're looking at the plan to adopt, on page 3, there would definitely be the removal of the bullet about quarantines, and there would be a reference to the DHHS algorithm. The blue level is no individual mask use is optional. Yellow level is mandatory mask use for all persons. I think the part in the green level that we have, there were 3 options given. Mask use would be strongly encouraged for all persons. That means it would not be mandatory. We have the mask use for indoors will be required for students in grades pre-K through 8 and strongly recommended for 9-12. The mask use will be determined by utilizing the DHHS rubric. I guess the first decision the board probably should look at is which of those 3 options would you like in the green level? And or 4th option. If you are creative and would like to come up with a fourth option, but which of those 3 options would you like to see in the green level? That would be a good place to begin trying to form a motion or adopting a plan.
And I think it was 3. Second one, yeah.
I'd like to hear from Adam, if I could, about, some people here had suggested, anyone 12 and older, potentially optional, and anyone under, which is essentially 5th and 6th requirement, optional for 7 and 8. Is that possible? I mean, how would that, work, splitting that in half of the school?
I think that would be very, very difficult. I think I just don't see how that would work well in the building. You have 2 grades that don't have to wear masks, 2 grades that do. I understand the split, I get the split. The 7th and 8th graders really can be vaccinated. From a perspective of running the school, I think it's a challenge. They're gonna come into the cafeteria one right after the other. In the morning, like Clem had mentioned a few minutes ago, not cohort. Part of what I'm thinking this school year, if we come into the school year, we're not cohort. We're trying to get as many things back to normal as we can. You know, one of the big pieces of normal is before school. When kids get off the bus for clubs or whatever the case may be, or they're dropped off by their parents for clubs before school, my hope was to have kids come into the cafeteria again, where they're not cohorted. So it would just be a giant collection of 5th, 6th, and 7th, 8th graders all together in one space. I think that would be really, really tough to manage in situations like that. In the classroom, it's easy. I mean, in the classroom, you're a 6th grade classroom, piece of cake, no problem. But those outside of the classroom times, it's a challenge.
So your expectation will be like 2018, like before school, with the cafeteria, just still, kids still the difference between all be wearing masks?
Yeah, my hope is that we run pre-pandemic bus routes where buses are the main bus route. Kids get out of the bus, they come into the cafeteria. My hope is parents go back to the normal parent pickup drop-off time. My hope is the time of day start time and the end time return to what they were. Because by doing that, we can run all of our before school activities. And I think we've heard about social emotional health for kids. I think those clubs and activities are a huge part of that. And I think we can get that back, but I think it would be tricky if 5th and 6th graders were masked and 7th and 8th weren't. I do think that would be a tough split. I really do.
What in the classrooms do you think it'd be? Those 7th and 8th graders enter the classroom, and they take the mask off, and they leave to go in the hallway and put the mask on?
In theory, in the classroom, they're 100% sorted, right? I mean, you're gonna have, really, all of the 7th graders are 12 and above by the end of September, and, you know, they should all just be, they're all vaccine eligible. If they aren't yet, they're very quickly vaccine eligible. And they are sorted, I mean, so to speak, by age category, if you're looking at the 12 and above, they're sorted, you know, in that regard. Before school, really tricky. In the cafeteria, I don't think I can do that.
So leave that second part as it is, mask use outdoors will be required of all students and staff grades pre-K through 8. The only thing I would want to change personally, and obviously it's a board decision, but where it says green level, there's protection for when community transmission levels are elevated, I just would want to, like, or how are we defining community? Because
I'd like it as vague as possible. I really want to say.
right now, if you count Merrimack County, we have high, if you count Baltimore.
I think that line is just a descriptor of what we've used the green level for. It doesn't tell us when we would be in or out of the green level. I think it's just a description. We're using that because it's elevated. We're the other one we're going with is more substantial. Maybe we shouldn't use substantial, like yellow as the word substantial, but worse. Maybe that's not referring, maybe I should not refer directly to a place on this matrix.
All right, so I'm going to read back and ask for next vote. So the first amendment to the plan, I think we just did by consensus, so it's a mistake, pick up the vote. This amendment to the plan says that the green level adds layers of protection with the transmission levels are elevated. It is the second open bullet. Mask use while indoors will be required of all students and staff in grades pre-K through 8. And strongly recommend for grades 9 through those other two bullets and cross out the cohorting will be implemented as feasible. And that would, everything else would remain at the green level. People understand what the motion is?
Do we need that nuance of the 7th and 8th graders in the classroom?
Well, you can do it that way if you want. I think it would be incredibly difficult in the middle school to tell some eighth graders from your classroom you can take your mask off, but all the other times you have to have it on. I think that would be difficult to implement, but we've done other difficult to implement things, and I'm willing to, if that's what the board wants.
Bryce, you're proposing that the 7th and 8th graders wear their masks all the time, but when they're in the classroom, they can take them down. Right? What are you saying, essentially?
Like in the old school, the bell whistle blows, the door, teacher shuts the door, she says something, like, or he does, like, right, that's all we want.
Right, so they wear the masks on the bus, they wear the masks in the cafeteria, they wear the masks around the school, but when they're in the classroom, they can take them off.
If that would work, do you think, if it was just, was that simple, if it's that the 7th and 8th graders wear their masks all the time, but in the classroom, they can take them off and say, so design, is that good, or that's not the reason still?
Well, I think, so that's an interesting question. It will make the school more interesting, for sure. It is easy in that it's easy to manage, so I don't want to confuse that with, I think it's cleaner and easier to have school-wide decisions. I think the kids that come to our school are pretty magnificent, pretty awesome kids, and they generally do what you ask them to do. They're awesome kids, they really are. Do I think they'll do what we ask them to do? Yes, I do. Do I think there will be a strong preference among our faculty and among, even myself in running the building? Would I rather have one rule for all? Yes. Could we manage that rule in the classroom? They are sorted. I mean, if that's the will of the board, I mean, they are going to be all over 12. If that's the logic you're going in 7th grade classroom, so they all, in theory, have the option of being vaccinated in 7th and 8th grade. I know I just couldn't do it in the non-classroom spaces, like that part of it would not work. But I do have a lot of faith in our kids. They always rise to doing it. If we ask them to put a mask on, they'll put a mask on.
I don't know about direct, I mean, again, in my view, those kids have not had the opportunity to vaccinate, so I hate the fact that they have to wear the mask at all. It's only logistically is the reason why we're making these kids wear the masks in the first place. So in my view, whatever we can do to limit those kids having to wear those masks, I would run it.
Yeah, it's the combination of, I agree completely. If they have the ability to be vaccinated, even, it still does go against the recommendations of the CDC and the AAP, realizing that our current vaccines are not as protective against, potentially, maybe as protective against the Delta variant as prior. So they're trying to protect it. If we're saying we don't think we need masks, once you're vaccinated, have them off the classroom exits. So I'm okay to do it. I don't feel strongly. I don't know if you guys.
We don't want a dog in this fight.
That's true.
I'm okay with it. All right, so I have something like this. The mask use will be required of all students and staff in grades pre-K through 8, and stronger records ready to go. 7th and 8th graders may remove masks in a 7th and 8th grade classroom. I mean, is that clear enough to get what we're trying to do?
I think that would be clear enough. It's only in the classroom during class time, unless the teacher.
They're with all 7th or 8th graders.
Right, they're only with other students.
Don't you have young 7th and 8th graders or kids who rise up and take classes that are above their grade level?
I'm trying to think of the possible exception, because every 7th grader really does become I'm trying to think of his 7th grader would be. There's half the 6th graders going out for a math class. So if we had a sub 11-year-old in the class, we'd have to, an 11-year-old or below, we'd have to have masks for in that class. The only time that would actually happen in math class, our schedules don't lend themselves to that, it's just we're running a block now instead of 8th grade. So you're asking about an exception, and I really have to look to see if that exception exists.
I'm just asking about whether it's
If that situation exists, can you build a caveat in that I could have masks worn in that class if you're someone who is not eligible for the vaccine? I think that would probably address that concern. I don't think it exists.
Would we be writing that
Yeah.
as such?
You got
I was just, mask use windows will be required of all students and staff in grade pre-K through 8, including grade 12. 7th and 8th graders may remove masks in the 7th and 8th grade classroom where all students are vaccine eligible. If that is your green level, then I think the next thing to look at is your status level decisions. That's page 4. And what is going to trigger a change in status, both to remove masks or to either do a more mask or less mask? What would, I mean, we talked earlier, what's the action plan? I mean, if we start with this, because I think after you accept the plan in total, you have to say, okay, we're going to start, I think in green is where the consensus is, but then what changes or what triggers a status level change by that subcommittee, both either to go more mask or less mask? What triggers that change?
I mean, the way it's worded right there does not, I don't think it refers directly to using a matrix. It says that you're going to make the decision informed by using your subcommittee, and the decision will be informed by using this data, the national state guidance changes, community spread data.
But I'd like, thank you for giving me decision-making process, I love it, no I don't. But I need some markers. So my question would be, if the community spread goes below substantial, why don't we take off masks? If Bow and Dunbarton goes above, or do we only look at school cases? Do we only look, maybe we put something in there about a cluster or an outbreak in school.
You know, I don't know that you need, if you go by this A matrix, whatever matrix you pick, there's sometimes going to be data to tell you you shouldn't be following that matrix so specifically. So we could have a bunch of cases in both, but they're not related to exposures that our kids may be around. There could be low numbers in Bow, but the numbers are just going up like crazy in New Hampshire. I don't know that you can use, and one more thing. Last year we were trying to decide whether we were open or closed. It's very important for the public to be able to have a grid they can look at to know whether we should be open or closed, so they can make some decisions about whether they're going to work the following day or they have to take it all out. I don't know if you need to have it so black and white, because I think it'd be easier for you to make decisions informed by what's going on in the community, touching base with the group. I don't know if the grid works well enough.
Okay.
I don't know, that's my opinion.
That community spread data is a link, and it goes to the community spread data that is counted. Can we at least put something that says a little bit different?
Yes, exactly.
But can we put something in there about community spread where it's going to look at local as opposed to?
Can we look at both? Because I don't know that.
Yeah, so in
Our
the
town numbers
community
are so
spread
small that they
data,
don't inform changes.
Put, county and local. County and local. And local.
Just to look at
Oh,
those
and
numbers.
local, yeah, and county and local.
Yeah, that's important between all those.
Well, are you looking at, are you guys saying you're looking at community and local, or are you saying you're gonna look at one for it?
Both.
Anything you want.
What would cause us, this is the exit. What would allow us to take masks off of kids in K?
I think there are a variety, I mean, so certainly if national.
The numbers stay where they are and the vaccine is available.
If if those groups are vaccinatable, so vaccines available for the 8 through 8 group. But not that low, so if it's available, while we're having surge, you don't take it away. If the numbers are horrific, you don't take away that moment, so it's gotta be a combination of things.
If the surge goes away, if before vaccinations.
So we have,
away.
if we see that there's not much illness out there, the hospitalization, but if we have this rapid, just, yeah, so, I don't know if we are smart enough to use the number, we see that the number is low. I don't think it needs a easy number, but it should be discussed with this subcommittee. The number is low. Yeah, that's that.
I know for me, I'd like to sit here 3 weeks from after school starts, and I reeled off all the schools. We're kind of a hybrid, it sounds like we're heading towards. And I really want to factor in what's happening at schools, and what happens in Concord, and what happens in Dover. And for me, that's a driver of mine, because is it happening in schools or not? And that's what we're gonna know in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I don't know, I mean, if the, I'm hoping, semi-hoping but if things are working in each of the schools, whichever method they're using, the numbers aren't up, it might just be it hasn't hit them yet. I mean, it'll depend on where we are in the county-wide numbers too. So if the numbers are settling down and we haven't had spread in schools, that's helpful. If the numbers are still going up, then you might be too early in the data. So I agree with that. I don't know if we'll know.
Well, why do we need it different than tonight? I mean, we all met tonight, we all factored in comments from people, we considered whatever each of us considered. Why can't it be vague?
It can, I just want to trigger. I mean, I want an exit plan, I want to say something, and I think that's what people are concerned about. If you start with mass, do we just drift with mass all through the school year? What is the trigger that says, no, we are willing to take mass up?
I think the main thing we do with the vaccine, and for me, the vaccine becomes available for all of our school age kids, which will probably be before this year's over.
Or
And
transmission in Merrimack County is.
yeah, we have decided that, it is.
What about at the request of the SAU 67 board subcommittee, at the request of a subcommittee member? That would trigger.
I know where we're at, but what if county level, or right now, our local levels are not substantial, right? Are they moderate or are they in the middle?
Well, it depends what you look at as local. There's going by these guidelines say to go by county, I believe. As your community, so that's
someone from
substantial.
Dunbarton on the subcommittee because we have no representation on it.
No, I would be part of consultation.
Sure.
I think Bryce's, why not just set a date and meet again in a few weeks after we see how it goes? Is that
I warn another SE meeting, go through this whole process again. And I totally accept that, but I want some sort of marker that says we can make a decision to take that up, because I think what everyone.
Right, I think to be
what people
transparent
are
and
concerned about
fairness to
is
them.
once you make this decision, you're gonna drift through it all year long. What if we get through the first 3 weeks, everything's copacetic, everything's going, and the surge is going downhill? Can we take the next one?
Yes.
Well, at what level of, I mean, I get it, the group might agree to that, my dissension, I might not agree.
I am willing to say we're revisiting, give me a date, warn another meeting, we'll go through the process again, but I don't want it open-ended.
Right.
For a snow day, it's pretty easy, I look on the weather, it's just gonna snow, okay?
This member of the subcommittee.
Sometimes.
It's something.
This member of the subcommittee isn't gonna be agreeable while the children are not vaccinated.
To everything.
Well, they'll be vaccinated in just a few months, so,
But
not in 3 weeks.
But I would, can we put the marker in for 3 weeks? We're gonna have discussion over again, because we'll have some more data.
I would say school starts like a week and a half, so let's say a month, because then you're like 2.5 weeks.
I prefer.
Okay, give them a date. Give you a date. It's
And
Thursdays,
we'll
or Thursdays
warn
good
the
for
meeting, we'll
everybody?
go there, but I think there has to be a plan for it, or there has to be at least the opportunity to discuss the end. And I think that's what people are afraid of is, and I think last year, once you went to a certain level, it was very hard to pull that level back and go less restrictive. It was much easier to go more restrictive. It's harder to come back to least restrictive. But I'd like a chance to do that. And I think, I heard a lot of people who said, if there's no problem, why do we pull the mask?
I agree with that. I think that's a good thing. Let's look at it.
Great, so a month, work,
What date is it?
September 16th.
Is that Thursday?
Yeah.
So we will revisit this September 16th full board meeting.
SAU.
But you don't want to go through this rewriting in the plan, right? Like, you want more of a plan beyond that right now?
What I would like the board to do is to adopt the plan as written, to say that we are opening in the green level for the opening of school, and I will get this all out as soon as possible. We will revisit that decision September 16th at a full SAU meeting. And I think what we're revisiting is what level are we at?
I thought you were concerned about revisiting it other than that date. So let's say we revisit it, we say status quo. How does that solve the problem moving forward? Don't
So you put another date out there. So we'll revisit it. Maybe say, okay.
By September 16th, we will probably know when the vaccine is going to be.
But I want to have I just am afraid of growth. I'm afraid of we get going and again, you do not know. We could get in a weekend, we could be having school issues and school cases, and we're like, well, we need to mask up everybody or so forth. The committee can make that decision. But if we go in and it's kind of like copacetic and we don't have school cases.
Yeah.
And everything's going fine, we're probably gonna have the same arguments. Well, it's the masks that kept us from doing that. But I think we at least have to have a date to say we're gonna revisit it. I think there are a lot of people who spoke tonight who are very concerned about masks. And, we can't just say we're gonna drift into it for the year. We have to have things to revisit.
Okay, so do we have to vote to pass?
So what I would like to vote for is to accept, there's a couple separate votes. One, to accept the plan as it has been revised. Two, to say that the opening level for the school year will be the green level. And three, the decision will be revisited September 16th at a full SAU.
Barring any major changes in these things.
Well, the committee can always meet in between if there's something we need to respond to and go for it. And I will try to get this done tonight or tomorrow, early tomorrow morning, get it out to everyone.
So we don't have to roll call, right?
You don't have to do a roll call.
Dr. Cascadden, can you please review specifically the changes that are the amendments to the plan?
Yep, amendments to the plan being proposed are on page 3. Take out the second bullet at the top, which talks about the 20 days quarantine and refer directly to the BHS algorithm. Under the green level, we will adopt the middle open bullet. Mask use while indoors will be required of all students and staff in grades pre-K through 8 and strong elementary grades for 9 to 12. 7th and 8th graders may remove masks in the 7th and 8th grade classroom where all students are vaccine eligible. So that would be the change to that one. And then under status level decisions.
Were we, can I interrupt? Were we deleting the?
And deleting the cohort will be included in the change.
The cohorting, that one we're deleting?
Yeah.
Delete that bullet. Sorry, get down myself. And under status level decisions, the factors that will inform decision-making process, keep everything but under community spread data, say both local and or county. And then the last bullet, we revisit the decision on September 16th at the full SAU meeting.
I don't know about that, staff's level change decisions. I'm thinking back to this past year. Sometimes we were having problems doing some of those changes because some folks would point to one of those factors and others were not. It wasn't a consistent change. I really think it needs to be more vague as to what we can do with that.
I don't know if this is.
You kept that? Because there's other factors to consider, and it should be more between each of those.
Look at the way you're talking, we're lying.
Following factors may inform the decision-making process, including but not limited to the things that we have, and then the four between both and county and or. Those two separate president, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'll have to get there for you.
Okay,
So we voting?
so let's take a vote, so all in favor?
Of adopting the SAU 600 plan 2021-22 as amended.
Who made the motion on that?
No one, we're asking.
Oh, yeah.
I'll move it. Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
One. Zero.
Then I'd like a motion from the board to say that we will open school in green level according to the plan to be revisited at a SAU meeting on September 16th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
I think we promised that we would open public comment.
Okay.
Public
So,
comment is open if people want to step to the microphone.
anyone has any public comment?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Not on the light.
There's no on-off button. He just has to adjust it in the booth. There you go.
All right. Good evening. I'm Marty Flecker, live in Bow. My daughter goes to Bow Memorial School. My wife was up here earlier. I'm listening to all the comments, and everybody's saying that they're making the decision for our kids. I just can't understand that. I mean, there's a doctor up there saying that all these kids are going to be eligible for the vaccine. Do you actually think we're all giving our kids the vaccine? I'm vaccinated. My wife's vaccinated. Most of my family is. My 11-year-old daughter is not going to be vaccinated with that. Is that FDA approved? But we're getting an experimental emergency vaccine. But you think all of these parents, the ones with the guts to show up, are actually going to get their kids vaccinated that don't need to? We have 4 cases in the whole damn county or town of Bow. What are we doing here, people?
Right.
You're not looking out for us. There's one guy who is, and he's wearing a black shirt up there. The rest of you should be worried about getting primary the next time this comes up, your school board positions. I know you think it's funny. Right. All right, we're not here for the sheep. We're here for the lions. And what you see around here are lions. Some of them are going to wake up, but that's not our job. Your job is to listen to the people. What people are you listening to? You're not listening to anybody here. There's one person who is and saying, hey, maybe we should just let the parents make the choice. If you don't want your kid to wear a mask, okay, we're not going to make them wear it. I'm telling you what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull my kid out of them. I love the school. I love every single teacher in there, and I appreciate everything that you guys did last year to get them back into school. I do appreciate that. But everybody's talking about follow the science. Where's the science? We're talking about looking at data from Merrimack County, and then we have, what, less than 20 cases here locally? Give me a break, people. I mean, think about what you're doing to us. Yeah, the teachers get to take off work and they get paid leave and paid vacation, whatever. I'm blue collar, I'm retired Air Force, my wife's retired Air Force. We still work. You got a drop of a hat, you gotta stop and then, oh, well, some kid got a fever, now the whole class has to go back home, okay, you gotta stay home. You don't do that normally, do you? I mean, are there kids dying left and right from COVID? No, they're not. The elderly and those who are vulnerable have been vaccinated if they want to. The kids aren't vulnerable. I don't care if you got a PhD. Let's use some common sense. Thank you.
Hi, Ross, you spoke earlier. The meeting on the 16th, September 16th, is that going to have public comment as well? I'm sorry if I was sleeping here.
Fairly similar structure.
All right, thank you. And I'm sorry, the gentleman with the blazer, could you tell me those statistics again? You read some statistics about kids being sick, and I wasn't able to process that fast enough. Could you share those again?
Yeah, what I saw, I don't know, somewhere, was that in January of 21, it was like 0.02% of kids were hospitalized. Very small percentage.
And of the kids that were hospitalized, were we able to see how many actually died?
I didn't see that wherever I read that.
Okay, so I'm sure this will get fact checked later, but I think there's 75 million kids 0 to 18 in the US. I think 340 have died of COVID since the beginning. So my question to a lot of the community, we're being safe, right? We're trying to protect the children. We want to protect the community. A lot of this I'm not really understanding. If only 350 kids have died of COVID since the beginning of the pandemic, and the number astronomically small of kids that actually get sick and are hospitalized, who are you protecting? Which kid are you protecting? You have a better chance of protecting the kids by eliminating high school sports, by removing all soda and candy from the classroom. No more Halloween, no more candy. More kids are getting sick from candy and high school sports than from COVID. So we're not protecting the kids. And let's overlay that information with masks and how effective the masks are. So if kids aren't getting sick and kids aren't dying of COVID, and then we're gonna put a mask on them, which doesn't really work. So I'm a little confused about that. Then the next piece is, why are we so concerned about community spread when our kids get sick and they go home and then it spreads at home? There's a vaccine. There's a vaccine. I'm not wearing a mask because I've had COVID and I got my vaccine, both of them, and I'll go get my booster. I'm not scared of COVID because I have the best available science, and that's a vaccine. So why is the word community even coming up? These little kids, they're gonna go home to everyone who can have a vaccine. And why are we wearing a mask in general? If I have a vaccine, everyone in the world can wear a mask to protect me, but I'm protecting myself because I have a vaccine. So all these little guys, all the little children that are headed home to everyone who's vaccinated or has had a chance to have a vaccine. The community spread from children who are not dying of COVID and to going home to parents who are capable of having a vaccine. Where's the community that's showing up to support the children so they don't have to wear masks at school? Why are grandparents not visiting their kids at school, their grandchildren? Why are we asking children to suffer when there are other available options? All right, for all the doctors, I think there was 4, maybe a 5th one, there was a husband or something. What would happen, Doc, if you came out in this meeting in a public forum and you said, I'm a doctor and this is what I think, and you didn't toe the line for the CDC? I bet it doesn't go too good for you. I bet that there's some organizations out there that wouldn't really go too well. Yeah, go ahead.
I have no reason why I need to follow those guidelines, except that I believe in them. So I'll let you discuss.
Okay, so let's take the CDC, the national CDC guidelines. They're looking for the entire country. You're the school board and we're asking you to look for a couple of schools. My school, where my children go, the CDC is looking for the whole country. I'm asking you, Doc, to take what the CDC says and then apply it with your wisdom and judgment to what it means to this school. And I think you're doing kind of an okay job. You're not towing the full line, but there's plenty of room for you to give in a little bit more room, Doc, and say, hey, we have 0 to 4 cases.
You're starting to get a little personal.
I apologize, okay.
Again, the personal public comments to share your views. I've heard them loud, but you get a little aggressive.
Oh, okay, thank you, Dean. So for the doctors, I would wonder what would happen if they came out in a public forum and said something different than what their peers are saying. We could see that from some of the doctors who testified before Congress and had their YouTube videos taken down to where now you can't see what those doctors have said publicly. Another thing, I didn't notice that it was raining tonight and there was some lightning, but I didn't see anyone running around on the golf course with a lightning rod protecting all the golfers who wanted to play golf in the rainstorm with the lightning. Why are we asking children to wear masks when all the adults have the option for the vaccine? People don't come to my house and swap out my batteries on my smoke detector. Where are those people?
You've had your 3 minutes.
Thank you.
I just want to say that one of the mission statements of this school is to care for each person every day. We have decided as a community to care about our community. We need to act like it. It is important to take care of each other. Think about your child's best friend. The one that your child comes home and is so excited that that kid is in their class, and they need to see that kid every day. They're so excited that you're willing to take them out and go do a fun activity together. Their face lights up when they see that best friend. I'm sure you all have seen that in your child, and it probably warms your heart that your child has a friend that they love and care about. Imagine if your child gets sick, and let's say that their immune system is as strong as so many of you have made that point, that your immune system is strong enough to fight off this virus. But imagine their best friend's immune system is not as strong. Imagine if your child who got sick, mild illness, passed it on to their best friend, who they love just as much as they love their parents. Imagine the guilt your child might feel if their best friend got sick because of them. Imagine if their best friend was sent to the hospital because they couldn't breathe. And imagine the fear that that best friend felt when they couldn't breathe. Do you want to put that weight on your child's shoulders? Do you want to endanger your child's best friend? It is important that we care about each other. So even if your mask doesn't protect you, you're protecting your child's friends. We know how important it is to have friends and to see each other in person, which is why everybody is very much looking forward to having consistent in-person learning. But if your child is missing that best friend because you refused to mask your child, you refuse to care about your child's best friend, well, it's not going to be the same positive experience that they would have had otherwise. So please consider caring about your community. It's important.
I see the point. We have one more? Thank you.
I just want to go on record, I still love all you guys, I hate every single decision you guys have made tonight except for Jeff, but I still love all of you equally.
Will you give me a hug?
I will hug you right now. My question, we're gonna do it? Are we really doing it?
But I need a hug after tonight, so you can quick.
My question, I do have one question. So somebody said, and I think it was Jeff said, that there's 4 active cases in Dunbarton right now. Is that
0 to 4.
0 to 4? Okay. And then do we know how many active cases there are in Bow right now? There's 10. My question is, do we know the demographics? Are they children? Are they adults? Are they in an old folks home? Are they over on White Rock? Where are these people? Who are they? Do we know their age levels?
We don't know.
We don't know that information. Okay. When we're making the determination, it sounds like we're going to be doing it based on Bow and Dunbarton. Are we doing it on the school system or are we doing it on the town as a whole? Because I still go back when that Warner incident was, and I'll be the first one to admit it, I was furious to find out that 25, 70-year-old people in Warner, New Hampshire took out our school for 3 weeks. And if that happens again because it's at a nursing home in White Rock, I'm still going to be just as upset about it.
I think at our next meeting, we'll be 3 weeks in, we'll know if we're getting stuff in school. And I think that's the hard thing for me right now. It's like, how can you factor in school cases when we're not in school? We didn't have anything over the summer, but it's summer programs and so forth. And I think you're right. I think you do need to look much more strongly at how this is impacting the school and not just in the community. And I think we'll have that data, we'll have a better feeling for what it's going to be like.
So is that what you think we'll go off of then, or are we going to go off of?
Well, and that's why I asked for the 3-week look.
Okay.
And I think what I've heard everyone say tonight, we really want to look locally, we want to look at effects of our schools and not effects on large schools. So I don't know what the board's going to do, but I think local definitely.
Bring it in, come on.
Hey, come here, brother.
Can we go to adjourn?
Oh, all right.
Sorry, go ahead.
Got late in line. I missed some of the meeting tonight, so I'm not sure if some of this has been covered and arrived late, as you may have noticed. But I want to make a couple of points and maybe ask a question. There were some comments, or there was a comment, I guess, covered before, some data from January. I think that doesn't cover the recent surge, though, in the Delta variant. So I think that's an important point to consider. And I think that goes in line with what was just said by Dr. Cascadden, is that, in revisiting it, again, I think the trajectory is more understood. That will give us a better understanding of what this actual variance impact is locally. Another point is, I don't know if we really fully understand breakthrough infections in children yet. Would that be fair to say? No. The children that are 13-year-old children? Okay. So they can be vaccinated. We don't understand what breakthrough infections would be in 13, 14. So, and then from then, if it's first of the year, perhaps, when the younger children will get vaccinated, when that gets approved, then it'll be much later before I understand that, correct? So I think it's probably a moving target, something we have to understand and be wary of, and perhaps be aware of as we go forward. And I guess the last point, I don't know if this was also covered, was, do we have a good understanding of how many children in the school are not able to get vaccinated because of medical reasons? That's something we should really understand, correct? Before we open up, and that's another point here, is that we talk about it being a choice, but some don't have that choice, even if they're of age, correct? So I would say that that'd be an important point to consider when making a decision that covers the whole school. So those are my points. I don't know if that's, leading text or. Oh, sorry, my name is Jared Morrow, 9 Sharon Drive in Bell.
We have to make all of the decisions we're making basically with imperfect data. Correct. And we all have to admit that we don't know more than we know. And that's hard for all of us, right?
Right, absolutely. Right, I don't mean to say that you're not doing that. I just think that's really important. I like the idea, what the proposed idea of having another meeting in 3 weeks and You know, some of the modeling shows that the peak will occur in October, sometime in October. So, you know, if you're at the crest, I think it would be interesting to see what the projections are. Thank you very much.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much for making all of that work. So, that could have been worked really, really well. Well, you've gotten really good at it. Thanks so much.
Well, you guys got some serious